Timeless Assassin by author Raj_Shah_ 7152 Chapter 201-225. Sky God Arena, Finals Match 1, Yu Shen vs. Captain Ramos. The crowd's excitement hit a fever pitch when the two captains stood across from one another, neither of them speaking, nor moving, as they just glared each other down in absolute silence. Most fighters, when looking into the eyes of Gu Ramos, trembled in their boots. However, Yu Shen wasn't one of them. The Rodova captain didn't seem fazed in the slightest that he was standing across from Geneva's finest, as there was no visible tension in his shoulders, nor any sign of hesitation, as though this was exactly where he'd always intended to be. Then, slowly, almost ceremonially, he unsheathed both his swords and pointed them forward at Ramos, blades crossed like a hunter lining up his first strike. Ramos didn't flinch. He responded by drawing both his curved sabers with a swift snap of the wrists, spinning each in a tight circle before resting them back against his forearms, a gesture of both readiness and defiance as his crimson armor caught the light reflected from his blades. This is the fight of the tournament, Derek breathed through the mic, voice dropping into awe. Two captains. Two warriors at the peak of their academies. If this doesn't get you on your feet, nothing will, Lee added. As from the stands, the roar only grew. Chants overlapped. Fans screamed themselves hoarse, as Rodova's black and gold drowned in Geneva's silver and blue across the arena stands. Bzzzzz. The camera drones zoomed in on both fighters' faces. Neither of them blinking. As begin. The referee's voice cracked through the comms, and just like that, both men exploded forward. Yu Shen was the first to strike, his approach tactical, as he closed the distance with high-speed footwork. His aim wasn't to overwhelm Ramos immediately, but to apply pressure early and test Geneva's captain's defensive tempo. He had studied the tapes, and he believed he had the edge in speed, and if that proved true, then engaging fast would give him control of the center. Clang. The first collision came clean, Yu Shen's dual swords crashing against Ramos's curved sabers in a crossing parry, as sparks shot out from the impact. Ramos held firm, blocking the incoming blow with crossed sabers, his boots grinding into the sand-gripped floor beneath them. But instead of pushing back, Ramos pivoted on his heel, letting Yu Shen's momentum overextend just enough before he slid under his arm and struck. Clang. Sank. A cut opened on Yu Shen's right shoulder. Just a graze. But it was blood. The first mark of the match. Oh. The crowd erupted. Ramos with the first hit. Lee shouted. That looked like a calculated misdirection. Yu Shen thought he had the edge in that clash, but Ramos baited him perfectly. Yu Shen leapt back, eyes narrowed, not in pain, but in acknowledgement. A good hit. A clean read. Ramos had waited for the opening, and took it precisely when the opportunity presented itself. He's more reactive than I thought, can't take him on with just superior speed, Yu Shen assessed mentally, shifting his stance. Instead, he snapped his wrist forward and called his first technique. Snowpiercer. A shimmering arc of ice surged forward in a narrow crescent, sharp as razors, gliding across the air like a slice of frozen death. Ramos responded with a defensive spin, his sabers whipping through the air in wide curves as he activated Stormguard Cut, a deflection technique designed to disperse elemental projectiles while maintaining rotational balance. Crack. The two abilities collided mid-air, the force of the clash sending an icy wind spraying out in all directions, peppering the front rows with fine frost. Woo-ah, Derek said, laughing nervously. If you're sitting ringside, you're basically in the splash zone. The moment the frost cleared, Yu Shen charged again, not to repeat the earlier mistake, but to follow up while Ramos's guard was still in mid-recovery. A feint slash high, a low strike sweeping from the left, and a spinning cut from the right. Each movement was calculated, meant to test Ramos's timing and reaction limits under compound pressure. Clang. 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 Ramos blocked all three, but the last strike forced him off balance for just a second, long enough for Yu Shen to twist his blade downward and land a clean elbow to his ribs. Thud. Ramos staggered, but didn't fall. Instead, he retaliated immediately with a double saber uppercut, the curved edges scraping Yu Shen's chest armor and ripping through the outer layer. Both men stepped back simultaneously now, each bleeding, as while Yu Shen bled through his chest. Ramos spat a mouthful of blood, the elbow to the chest seeming to have caused some internal damage. So this is the strength of the Geneva captain. So that's Yu Shen, the Rodova captain. Both thought simultaneously, as they realized that the two of them were pretty much evenly matched, and that this was sure to be a dog fight. Come on now, don't be scared, Daddy won't hurt you if you approach nice, Ramos taunted at this moment, as Yu Shen responded with a dry smirk, his blades lowering just slightly, not in surrender, but in preparation. I wasn't worried about you, Yu Shen replied coolly. I was worried you'd be over too soon. And then he lunged again, this time not with speed, but with cold control. His right sword led the charge, sweeping horizontally while the left stabbed upward in a diagonal feint. Parry. Ramos parried the horizontal strike, but the feint became real as Yu Shen twisted his wrist mid-motion, bringing the left blade down into a sudden arc aimed for Ramos's thigh. Clang. Asterisk. Scrape. Asterisk. Ramos blocked it, but not in time to stop the edge from biting just shallowly into the meat of his leg. Yu Shen carves back. Derek shouted. That's one apiece now, these captains are bleeding and they're just getting started. Ramos grimaced, but didn't slow. He took the pain as fuel and pushed forward, cutting high with his right saber before looping the second in a reverse slash, aiming to force Yu Shen into retreat. Yu Shen retreated 2 steps, but that had always been his intention. He raised his foot and slammed it down with controlled force, activating Frigid Bloom. Frozen lotus petals bloomed out from his position, covering a small radius in sleek frost. A trap, meant to reduce foot traction, and Ramos, charging forward to capitalize, found himself slipping just slightly. It was enough. Yu Shen spun low, blades laced with shimmering cold, and slashed upward in a rising arc. But Ramos was no fool, he let himself fall into the slip, rolling forward beneath the blow, and as Yu Shen's momentum left him exposed for a heartbeat. Thwack. Asterisk. A heavy boot connected with Yu Shen's ribs, launching him back 5 feet into a rough skid. Oh. The crowd wailed. He's using the terrain against him. Lee said. That frigid bloom backfired, Yu Shen lost footing after the follow-through. Both men were slower now, they were bloodied and breathing harder. Yu Shen's ribs throbbed where the kick landed, while Ramos's leg was stiff, and his lungs injured from where Yu Shen had landed his elbow. And yet, neither looked away. They dashed in again, colliding like titans in the center, blade against blade, teeth clenched, sweat dripping from their brows as every movement became heavier. Blizzard Fang. Yu Shen released a mid-range strike, sending jagged spears of ice outward in a starburst, forcing Ramos into evasive spins, but the Geneva captain ducked under, absorbing a few shallow cuts along his shoulders and arm before closing the distance with a brutal shoulder tackle. They slammed together, grappling briefly, weapons grinding between them, ice mixing with blood as Ramos hissed. Red Bloom Edge. With a flash, Ramos's sabers ignited with crimson energy as he performed a dual upward slash, the impact sending Yu Shen staggering again as the blades lacerated across his right bicep and collarbone. But Yu Shen's response was immediate. Glacier spikes. From the ground beneath Ramos's feet, jagged icicles erupted, forcing him to leap backward, but not before one of the spikes tore through the side of his calf. Crack. Asterisk. Slice. Asterisk. Gasp. Asterisk. The crowd was screaming now, not in excitement, but in awe and horror as this was the exact bloody fight they'd come here to witness. Both men were limping now. Both bleeding. Both exhausted. But still, they circled each other, blades held high. Yu Shen made one last dash, trying to end it with a final burst of energy, twin blades swirling in a final assault. But Ramos saw through it. He waited, and then, struck. Phantom Bloom, a rare movement skill whereby it looked like his afterimage was dashing left, while he was actually moving right. And unfortunately Yu Shen went for the wrong one, giving Ramos the opening he needed to circle to his back and slice his back open with a deep cut that stopped just short of his spine. Thud. Yu Shen fell forward, collapsing to one knee, as he desperately tried to push himself back up, but his body simply didn't respond. The pain, the fatigue, it had caught up, and although his mind wasn't done with this fight, unfortunately his body betrayed him, as he couldn't get up before the 5 count. Stop! The referee shouted, stepping in immediately once the 5 count was over, as he gave his verdict. Captain Yu Shen is unable to continue. Winner, Geneva Academy. Captain Ramos claims the opening bout. Roar. Asterisk. The Geneva side of the crowd detonated into cheers, their banners shaking the rafters as Ramos lifted a single saber in acknowledgement, bloody, staggering, but victorious. That was insane, Derek said, stunned. What a battle. That was the kind of fight you remember for the rest of your life. Both captains bleeding, both nearly collapsing, but Ramos finds the final edge. Geneva goes 1-0 up, Lee murmured, as at that point the medics rushed in, trying to save Yu Shen's life and stop the intense blood loss. I leave the rest to you, Yu Shen yelled towards the sky before passing out, as although he knew he had been defeated, he put his faith in his teammates, hoping that they would finish the job where he failed. Sky God Arena, Finals Match 2. Nobody on the Rodova bench expected Yu Shen to lose the opening fight. They had all been on the edge of their seats as Yu Shen took on Gu Ramos, and while it was a respectable performance till the end. Unfortunately, Yu Shen fell short of beating his opponent. The hell? Yu Shen lost. Su Yong barked out, throwing his hands in the air. I told you, Skyshard, that bum doesn't deserve to be captain. It should have been one of us, we could have cooked Gu Ramos, Su Yong said, as Minerva shot him a piercing glare. Watch your mouth, Yang. This is not the time to blame your teammates, be serious in your life for once, Minerva reprimanded as she stood up and headed for the tunnel. According to Rodova's plan, if Yu Shen fell, she would step in next. With her role being to stabilize, fight smart and pull a win back for the team, delivering big time as the second most senior fighter on the roster. And hence, that's exactly what she intended to do. Step, step. The roar of the crowd built to a crescendo as Minerva stepped into the arena, Black Hood fluttering behind her, silver bow already strung and ready. VA. VA. She's back, Derek shouted, rising from his chair slightly. Rodova's archer steps up after sitting out the semifinal. That injury she picked against Orion had us wondering if she would be fit to fight today, but by the looks of it, she's healed and locked in. True, Lee added, but this matchup doesn't favor her at all. As from the Geneva tunnel emerged her opponent. Damien Aroth, the shield-wielding juggernaut, a natural predator to all ranged fighters. That's a nightmare matchup for Minerva, Derek, Lee continued. This is exactly why winning the first bout is so important in the circuits, because it lets you dictate favorable counters. But now, Rodova is forced to stick to rotation, and that puts Minerva up against her class counter. Damien raised his massive tower shield with one hand and pounded his fist against it with the other, letting out a deep bellow that echoed through the stadium. Roar. The Geneva fans roared in support for him, as he tried his best to intimidate Minerva. However, to his dismay, Minerva didn't flinch, as she glared at him back with guts. Fighters, ready. The referee asked at this moment, as both nodded, giving him the green light to begin the fight. Begin. The referee's voice cracked out, and the second match of the finals commenced. Minerva moved first, light on her feet, sliding backward as she drew an arrow and let it loose. Twang. Asterisk. Clang. Asterisk. The arrow struck Damien's shield and shattered instantly. A test shot. She already knew it wouldn't land. What she needed was to test his reaction time and mobility, and so far both looked pretty good. Thud. Thud. Damien charged, footsteps thunderous, using his wide shield as cover while closing the gap, as Minerva responded with Phantom Trail, instantly weaving behind a cluster of illusory versions of herself, repositioning to the side for a clean shot. SHHHK. Asterisk. This arrow came faster. coated with a wind-imbued charge, as she used Gale Spike, aiming not for damage, but to force Damien to stumble by hitting the gap near his foot. And it worked. The giant staggered slightly, and Minerva took advantage with 2 rapid follow-up arrows that zinged toward his shoulder joint. Clang! Asterisk! Clang! Asterisk! Both blocked again, but he had to shift, giving her a few more seconds of breathing room. She's playing the angle game. Trying to chip him down through gaps in the armor, Derek narrated. That's how an archer handles a tank, making smart shots and applying surgical pressure. But Damien was done playing. As with a sudden burst of mana, he activated Shield Advance and propelled his body forward like a battering ram. Boom! Asterisk. Minerva barely dodged in time, rolling to the side, but even as she rose, she was forced to immediately fire another arrow just to keep him at bay. Clang! The arrow rang against his shield, breaking his charge, as Minerva breathed a small sigh of relief. That was too close. Way too close. Come on, she muttered, as she triggered Rainfall Volley, her signature skill, which made a single arrow that she shot towards the sky, split into multiple arrows on its way back, that remained suspended briefly in the air by wind magic, before descending like a storm over Damien's position. Thump. Asterisk. Thwap. Asterisk. Twing. Asterisk. Some arrows struck his shield. A few glanced off his armor. One clipped his leg and made him grunt, but unfortunately, the rain of arrows wasn't enough to bring down Damien. This time, he charged and he kept coming despite Minerva's best efforts to stop him, until he suddenly accelerated once again, when he found himself in range of activating Shield Advance. Crash. Asterisk. Unable to dodge, Minerva found herself tossed away like a ragdoll, as Damien's shield slammed into her body like a truck. Skid. Despite her best efforts to steady her body, she skid across the sand with little to no control over her body's momentum, as she picked up some minor scratches and bruises, along with a severe rib injury from the first impact. Oh. The crowd gasped, sad to see her rolling away like a helpless doll. However, there was nothing they could do to stop it. Eventually, she did stop and get back to her feet. However, it was clear from how hard she was coughing that she had definitely sustained heavy internal injuries. Still, she didn't yield. She raised her bow again, fingers shaking, and fired another shot, aimed straight at Damien's head this time. However, Damien blocked it with ease. Clang. Asterisk. He blocked it. And then, clang. Asterisk. He blocked another, as he walked towards Minerva nonchalantly. He weighed 160 kilograms, and when he came charging towards someone at full speed that was accelerated via Shield Advance, he reached peak speeds of nearly 140 kilometers per hour at times, which created enough of an impact force to break the bones of even Grandmasters. And although Minerva looked intact for now, he knew for sure that she had sustained heavy internal injuries that would make it hard for her to maneuver anymore in this fight, which was why he walked towards her in a leisurely fashion, knowing full well that she was going to be unable to run away even if he took his time. Sorry. I'm usually not this rough with pretty ladies like yourself, but this is the end for now, Damien said, as he activated another Shield Advance and slammed into her body, as he sent her flying out of the arena, as she crashed into the boundary wall. Boom. Asterisk. Winner, Damien Aroth of Geneva. The referee announced, as Ruar. Asterisk. The Geneva fans exploded again, erupting into a wave of cheers as Rodova's second loss was cemented. This is huge, Derek, Lee said. Geneva is 2-0 up. Rodova's back is officially against the wall. Both the senior grandmasters are out. It's all up to the juniors Leo Skyshard and Su Yang now. And of course there's Enzo too. Enzo can't do anything worthwhile here, Derek. There's no way he comes in handy. It's essentially a 2v5 now, Lee said, as Su Yang made his way towards the arena. A second consecutive loss for Rodova, this makes things very hard. It's Su Yang who steps up now for Rodova. Can he turn things around? Derek said, as Su Yang walked onto the arena amidst muffled cheers from the Rodova supporters, whose dream of winning the championship after 22 years now hung by a thread, unraveling with each breath. He walked with the calm confidence of someone who had mastered his craft, as he did not seem worried about who he was going to face at all, and was confident in defeating anyone that dared step up against him. And while he was ready to face anyone, if there was one man he wanted to face more than anyone else, it was Su Ran, and to his joy, as if summoned by fate, it was Su Ran who appeared from the opposite gate. A faint smile touched Su Ran's lips as he raised his silver spear and bowed slightly. "Good luck for the fight, brother, may the best fighter amongst us win," he said smoothly, his voice low, calm, and cordial. As just listening to his disgusting voice made Su Yang's blood boil with rage. If any other fighter said those words, and offered him that innocent-looking smile, Su Yang would have smiled back or offered him good luck, but never for Su Ran. Because he knew that smile very well. Knew that tone, knew that bow, and knew just how fake it all was. Everything about Su Ran was fake. That display of nobility and grace, designed solely for the patriarch watching from above, was an act meant to please and nothing more. Just another performance in Su Ran's lifelong play to appear dignified and respectable, just like a snake wearing silk robes. In truth, he was nothing more than a bastard child trying to play prince. A half-blood who had to pretend to be humble at every step of his upbringing because deep down, he knew what he really was. And his fakeness repulsed Su Yang more than anything else. "Rot in hell, commoner," Su Yang spat, pointing his sword at Su Ran's chest as his mana surged, flaring with razor-sharp intent. The camera panned to the private viewing box, where the Su clan patriarch remained motionless, his expression unreadable as he watched one legitimate son and one mistake prepare to tear each other apart. "Begin," the referee said at this moment, and the arena exploded. Su Yang jumped into motion without hesitation, vanishing and reappearing beside Su Ran in a flash of white energy, his sword already mid-swing in a vicious upward arc. But Su Ran didn't flinch, his spear spun into position with serpent coil wrapping around Su Yang's blade mid-strike, forcing the clash to be locked in a stalemate, as neither could push the other back. Their eyes met for a fraction of a second, both blank, both furious. Then Su Ran twisted his spear and pushed forward with the move drifting spiral, shoving Su Yang back with a spinning shockwave of compressed air that cracked the floor beneath their feet. Despite taking the blow head-on, Su Yang landed on his heels, barely skidding before lunging forward again with cross fang, a two-slash combination meant to cleave Su Ran's body in half. Su Ran was quick, countering with the technique seven-petal bloom, deflecting the first strike and absorbing the second with the spear's flexible shaft, parrying it perfectly, like someone who had studied Su Yang's every move since childhood. "Using the same old moves, brother. Have you learnt nothing new at Rodova?" Su Ran said at this moment, mocking Su Yang as he tried to look cool for the camera and their father. However, this was his big mistake, as Su Yang did not respond with words but rather action. He activated the move, Flickering Step, which was a move he had never shown in the circuits before, and as he activated it, Su Ran was left at a complete loss over where his real location was, as Su Yang reappeared behind his back and slashed low to cut off both his Achilles tendons at once. Slash! The hit connected, and a shower of blood sprayed outwards from Su Ran's heel as he screamed loudly, his voice cracking from pain. Og! But he didn't fall. He didn't even stumble. He limped, wobbling backward with each strained step, his wounded legs dragging across the arena floor as his spear came up in a shaky guard. He gritted his teeth and absorbed Su Yang's follow-up blows, barely parrying a vicious overhead strike and catching the edge of a flickering step feint that nearly took his arm off. At this point, every block looked like it would be his last. His mobility was nearly gone, his usual fighting stance was broken, and his overall prospects did not look good at all. But still, his eyes were wide, alert, and waiting, as despite his disadvantage, it was clear that he had not given up yet. He kept baiting Su Yang by keeping up with his defense and doing nothing else. After a few seconds, Su Yang broke his discipline and went for the move. Mountain-splitting slash. He tried to end the fight at once. However, this was the exact moment Su Ran had been waiting for. He tilted his spear at just the right angle, sliding Su Yang's blade off its axis with deflect, then twisted with a violent snap of his hips to drive a piercing stab straight through his opponent's core. Shink. Asterisk. The spear went clean through Su Yang's body, as he choked and spat blood, his eyes going wide as his breath was knocked from his lungs. Splat. Blood splattered the floor in front of him, and his sword arm twitched, beginning to fall. But he didn't drop. Not yet. Just like Su Ran before him, he too hardened his eyes and forced his body to move as he unhooked himself from the spear by willingly stepping back, as despite the gaping hole in his body, he seemed hell-bent on continuing the fight. Asterisk. Silence engulfed the stadium. Nobody in the audience could understand how Su Yang was still standing, especially the referee. And yet, with Su Yang still upright, sword raised, eyes locked, the referee had no choice but to let the fight continue for now. Blood poured from the wound in Su Yang's abdomen, hot and unrelenting as it painted the arena floor beneath him red, but Su Yang did not glance down. He couldn't afford to. Not when Su Ran was still breathing, as doing so while his trash brother was still alive, would give him a moment of immense satisfaction. Tremble. His sword trembled in his grip, not from fear or hesitation, but from the sheer strain of forcing his mangled body to keep moving. His breaths came in ragged, shallow gasps, each one scraping through clenched teeth, but his eyes, they were still sharp. Still locked onto his brother with a fury that could burn through steel. The spear wound had torn a hole straight through his abdomen, but Su Yang still stood tall with his feet planted and his sword raised, as he did not show signs of slowing down at all. He refused to stagger. He refused to kneel. And that too out of sheer pride and nothing else. Because he knew that if he did falter here, Su Ran would win. And that was something he would never allow. Surge. His mana surged erratically now, no longer flowing smoothly but flaring in violent bursts, like sparks from a dying fire. He could feel his body breaking down from within, muscle fibers tearing, nerves screaming, but none of it mattered. Not anymore, at least, when hatred was his painkiller and adrenaline his shield. You thought that would finish me? He rasped, blood seeping down his side as he took a step forward. Unfortunately, that's where you're wrong, trash blood. That's the difference between the true heir and trash like you. The crowd remained silent, stunned into stillness as they saw Su Yang continue despite bleeding so profusely, while Su Ran looked pale like he had just seen a ghost. How are you still moving? He asked in shock, as by all logical means Su Yang should have fallen down unconscious by now, however he did not. I'm still moving because this fight ain't over, bitch, Su Yang said, the expression in his eyes turning near maniacal, as he did not look like someone who was hurting or afraid of death anymore. But instead, looked like someone who planned to burn the universe down around him, just in case he did go down. Are you seeing what I'm seeing, Lee? There's a hole in Su Yang's body that we can see through, but he's still fighting, Derek said at this moment, as his voice sounded genuinely concerned. In my entire career as a commentator, I've never seen anything like this, Derek. The circuits are the pinnacle of gladiator sports, and we often see people with immense willpower competing here, but this is beyond willpower, this is madness, pure and untamed madness. Lee added, as he clutched his hair in disbelief. If he pulls a win from here, that, I can't even put it into words how that would be, Derek said, sounding unsure of how to even feel about something like that, as he checked himself mid-sentence. No, 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 Su Ran suddenly screamed from the center of the arena, his voice shrill and cracked. You're on the verge of dying. Just one small push and you'll fall over. He limped forward, dragging his injured leg as he closed the distance between them, eyes wild with disbelief and panic. His spear shot out in sharp, precise jabs, one after the other, like a man possessed, each strike aimed not to kill, but to shove, to tip Su Yang over the edge and make the nightmare end. But Su Yang, he didn't block, he didn't parry, he moved, like smoke, like a ghost, each stab missed by inches. One grazed past his cheek, another came close enough to ruffle his hair, but Su Yang glided around them, effortless, almost weightless, as if his body had transcended pain and fatigue. His eyes never blinked. His blade never lowered. He simply kept stepping forward, dodging each thrust as though he knew exactly where they'd land before they were even launched. And the more he moved, the more Su Ran's confidence began to unravel. Because Su Yong wasn't slowing down. He was closing in what seemed impossible movement for a man with as heavy an injury as him. Meanwhile, the Su family patriarch. While the majority of the audience in the arena couldn't fathom how Su Yong was moving so well even with such a massive injury, the Su family patriarch knew exactly why. His eyes narrowed ever so slightly, lips curling into the faintest shadow of a smile, as he nodded in acknowledgement. So, it's finally awakened. It was a matter of great joy for him, not because his son was surviving, but because this was the first time he had witnessed this ability naturally manifesting in one of his descendants. There was no mistaking it. Su Yong had awakened the Su clan's most prestigious bloodline skill, Unbroken. A trait that only revealed itself when death was near, and defiance ran deeper than the marrow. 2 minutes. That's all the skill gave. A window of near invincibility in a near-death state, allowing the body to keep fighting with no regard for pain, injury, or exhaustion. But to the Su patriarch, that wasn't the impressive part. The impressive part was that Su Yong had unlocked it on his own. He had not unlocked the skill via the clan's divine skill scroll, or by forcefully stimulating a certain portion of his genetic potential, but rather through pure instinct alone. Good, the old man thought, as although he didn't cheer for his son out loud. Deep down, a sense of satisfaction coiled inside his chest like a snake basking in the warm sun. This was exactly what Su Ran had been raised for. Although he had long allowed the illusion to linger that both his sons were candidates for the patriarch's seat, the truth was far more calculated. Su Yong had always been the only choice. The true heir. The bloodline holder. Su Ran was merely the whetstone. A necessary rival. A narrative device. A tool. From the moment of his birth, the patriarch had known the boy's role. He lacked the blood purity, the natural instincts. But what he did have was value. He could grow strong. Strong enough to provoke. Strong enough to challenge. Strong enough to push Su Yong beyond his limits. And today, he had done just that. You've played your part well, Su Ran, for that I must commend you, the old man muttered coldly. But this is where your relevance ends. He exhaled slowly through his nose, gaze fixed on Su Yang's relentless advance, as he already knew what the outcome of this battle was going to be from this point forward. Su Yang's win was a done deal, however, it wasn't going to come without a cost. Activating Unbroken came with a trade-off. For once those 2 minutes of invincibility passed, assuming the user survived, their body would be crippled for 6 full months, where strength, speed and mana sensitivity would all be reduced by 20%. A heavy price to pay for surviving what should have been fatal. But to the patriarch, that didn't matter, as he knew that Su Yong won't need his full strength for the next 6 months anyway after the circuits were over. And that him activating this skill on his own was already proof enough of his pure blood and sheer willpower. Su Yong was already walking the path of a ruler. A man willing to die just to not lose. And that was the only kind of man fit to inherit the Su Empire. As Su Yong continued to dodge and weave under the mounting pressure, Su Ran's concern deepened. His opponent moved with such composure and precision, it was as if the gaping wound in his abdomen didn't exist at all. What kind of a freak are you? Why can you still move like that? Su Ran asked in disbelief, voice cracking with frustration and fear. However, Su Yong didn't answer. His silence spoke louder than anything else, like a monster who no longer needed words to assert dominance. Shua. Su Ran thrust forward with a sharp, piercing jab meant to pin Su Yong in place, but Su Yong tilted just enough to let it pass by his shoulder. Shua. Su Ran followed it up with another jab towards his neck, however, Su Yong rolled under it, before sidestepping a sweeping cut. Just stay in one place damn it, Su Ran complained in panic, as Su Yang's movements became increasingly cleaner, as though his body had forgotten it was dying. And it was this panic that spilled into his technique, as he launched Venom Bloom, which was a 6-hit rapid combo infused with spear energy, where each strike he dished out was faster than before. Shua. Dot. 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 Shua. The thrusts were blinding in speed, however, despite him doing his best, Su Yang managed to weave through all of it, before pivoting low, as he countered with flickering step, vanishing for a split second before reappearing directly in front of Su Ran, blade already in motion. Clang. Asterisk. Their weapons clashed, but only Su Yang pressed forward, as he unleashed Phantom Cleave, feinted left, and then spun into a devastating mountain-splitting slash powered by pure momentum and rage. Crack. Asterisk. Su Ran's defense shattered at this moment, as his spear flew from his hands. And in the same motion, Su Yang drove his shoulder forward, slamming into his brother and knocking him flat onto his back. Su Ran gasped, the wind knocked from his lungs. His limbs flailed as he tried to roll away, but it was already too late. Su Yang raised his sword, and brought it down, stopping just 1 inch above Su Ran's throat. Yield, Su Yang growled, voice low and final, as Su Ran's eyes widened, his face betraying 1,000 emotions, as it went from shock, to relief, to humiliation, to anger, to resignation, and finally to acceptance, all within a split second. His mouth opened, but no words came, as he just nodded, twice, quickly. Winner Su Yang of Rodova. The referee declared at this moment, pushing Su Yang off Su Ran, as the Rodova supporters popped like crazy. Cheers. Deafening cheers covered the entire arena, as even the Geneva supporters could not help but clap for the Iron Man performance that Su Yang had just shown, as even if they did not support him, they could not help but respect him after this fight. That's what I thought. I'm better than you, Commoner Tra. Su Yang spoke in a haze, as he tried to get back to his feet and raise his fist in celebration. However, before he could do that, he just collapsed face first into the floor. Thud. Blood spread from beneath him like an ink blot on the pale tiles, and the crowd collectively gasped. The referee blinked, then turned toward the Rodova bench for instruction, as although Su Yang desperately needed treatment, as per tournament rules, he could not receive it until he was either defeated or the team yielded his spot. And with Yu Shen and Minerva out, all eyes landed on Leo, who sat on the Rodova bench with his arms crossed and his face convoluted into a frown. He's out of the tournament. He won't return. Get him treated, Leo said flatly, conceding Su Yang's spot, as he knew that delaying Su Yang's treatment would be for naught. There were absolutely no chances of Su Yang recovering from such an injury by himself without external help, and since he couldn't get that on the bench, having a dead body around was pointless for Rodova. Fighter Su Yang of Rodova is declared unfit to continue by his team and will no longer participate in the tournament. Medical team, please take him away, the referee announced, as the Jumbotron screen turned from showing a 2-1 score to a 3-1 score, as the healers rushed in. Su Yang was in a pretty rough shape, and needed intense surgery to save his life. However, with how competent the doctors present at hand were, his life was in no critical danger. However, what did suck though, was how he was down and out after a single fight, as this essentially left Leo to pull back Rodova from a 3-1 disadvantage, while being the last Grandmaster fighter on the roster. What a valiant effort by Su Yang to put a point on the board for Rodova, Derek said, his voice a blend of admiration and concern. But unfortunately, that win is only as good as a tie, because Su Yang is now officially out of the tournament. What a fight indeed, Lee agreed. The kid fought like a man possessed. But with his exit, the weight of the entire team now falls on one man, Leo Skyshard. To be fair, Leo has pulled off miracles before, Derek added. He once turned a 4-0 deficit into a 5-4 win against Button Academy. The man is built for clutch moments. Yeah, but this isn't Button Academy, Lee cut in, sharper this time. This is Geneva, the #1 ranked academy. These aren't scrappy underdogs he would be fighting, these are the best fighters of the tournament. So turning around a 3-1 deficit against them, that's bordering on impossible. Especially, He continued, when your only remaining partner is still stuck at master level, because that means Leo's essentially fighting Geneva alone from here on out. Derek let out a breath, the weight of the situation sinking in. Well, it is what it is. The question now is, what can he do about it? Dash 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 dash. Following Su Yang's defeat, it was Leo who walked out to the Sky God Arena, amongst a faint cheer from the Rodova faithful. The cheers sounded half-hearted and subdued now, instead of the roaring support that Yu Shen got when he walked out, as it was the sound of a crowd that had already buried its hope. They clapped for Leo because they had to. Not because they believed. The Jumbotron still read 3-1, and everyone in the stadium knew exactly what that meant. Rodova's bench was depleted, their stars were gone and their chances to win it all were slim to none. And yet, Leo walked like none of it mattered. He didn't worry about things beyond his control. Things like, could he really win 4 matches in a row against some of the finest fighters in the universe? Could he really carry a broken team to the championship? Or about who his next opponent was going to be? As he knew that all those thoughts were nothing more than noise. He let the doubts drift to the far edges of his mind, like mist sliding off a blade, and instead focused on the only thing that grounded him, which was the cold steel of the daggers in his grip, and how familiar they felt in his hands. One at a time. Let's just take this one at a time. Welcome to Fanfic Audiobook, your go-to place for immersive audiobooks. If you enjoy the content, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel for more amazing stories. And please support the author by link in description. Sky God Arena, Finals Match 4. Mikhail Sarin was the next fighter to step up from Geneva, and he was expected to defeat Leo by his team. After all, Mikhail specialized in neutralizing close-range, high-speed fighters, with his unique combination of short sword and pointed shield combat, designed not just to defend, but to control spacing, intercept movement, and dismantle momentum. This is it, kid. You're going down, Mikhail said, giving Leo the thumbs down sign as he took his starting spot, as the Geneva supporters roared in approval. Bozo. Leo muttered under his breath, not letting the opponent's pointless theatrics get under his skin, as he maintained his state of calm and focus. Both fighters ready? The referee asked at this moment, as both Leo and Mikhail nodded. All right, then begin. Dash 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 dash. As soon as the fight began, Leo disappeared from Mikhail's view in an unusual battle strategy that he hadn't used in the circuits so far. Mikhail scrunched his eyebrows, and followed the faint trail of footsteps on the sand, which kept him informed about Leo's real location, as although Leo was moving soundlessly, on the sand trap arena, the soft layer of sand always betrayed his true position. Clang! An invisible dagger came flying towards Mikhail, which he deflected with ease, as it seemed like not only was he tracking Leo's movements with his eyes, but he was also sensing movement in his surroundings via some perception skill, as he could easily make out the projectile coming his way, despite it being invisible. I don't know what you're trying to achieve by being invisible, Skyshard. But these kindergarten tricks won't work on me. I wasn't born yesterday, and Basics of Perception is a class that I took in my first year too, Mikhail said, as he tried to discourage Leo from continuing with his invisibility route. However, despite his warning, Leo never flicked into plain view, keeping the crowd on the edge of their seats on what exactly was going on. Then, as if he were purposefully messing with Mikhail, Leo activated Mirror World, creating a dozen clones of himself, who moved haphazardly in the sand around him, creating a dozen new footstep trails that crossed over and covered his real steps. What is this pointless nonsense? You know I can see you moving there, right? Mikhail said, as he traced the real invisible Leo with his short sword, pointing towards him constantly as he moved, until he did not. As suddenly, Leo used Blade Switch and teleported right above Mikhail, before coming crashing down on him with an overhead strike. Block. Mikhail blocked the move with his shield, the impact putting pressure on his knees as he sank slightly deeper into the sand. However, he took no damage. Push. Pushing Leo back, he followed up with a stab towards his gut, as Leo, still invisible, dodged by turning to the left, as his dozen clones ganged up on Mikhail and tried to stab him all at once. Slash, slash, dodge, slash. Forced to handle the small fries, Mikhail lost a precious couple of seconds trying to dispatch all clones, whereby he completely lost track of the real Leo, or what he was up to. Then, as he tried to find him again using his perception skill, Mikhail panicked when he could sense him nowhere, as it appeared like Leo had completely disappeared from the battlefield entirely. What? Where is he? Ref, is he still within the arena bounds? Mikhail inquired, with the crowd growing restless, as the response came in the form of a stunning slash across his cheek, which drew a thick line of blood. Slash. A dagger whistled past his head, with him only surviving being impaled, due to the instinctive jerk of his neck at the last possible second. However, this close encounter made him widen his eyes in surprise, as he could no longer figure out what was going on. What? Why can't I sense you? Where are you, motherfucker? Mikhail complained, as he turned around frantically, trying to look for any traces of Leo's footwork amongst the sand. However, he could find nothing with how messy the battlefield looked, with dozens of footsteps going in all directions. Stab. Another invisible dagger impaled him at this moment, this time in the thigh, as, "Aghhh," Mikhail screamed, his eyes wide with panic. He couldn't sense this one coming his way at all either, and that made him break his composure. In his head, he couldn't make sense of how Leo Skyshard was evading his senses so thoroughly. However, for the Transcendent and Monarch level fighters sitting in the crowd, they could perceive Leo's trick as plain as day. Mikhail's perception ability was called sectoral search, and how it functioned was that it searched for any signs of danger in a 100-meter radius, sector by sector. For the first 0.2 seconds, it searched the battlefield at 0 to 72 degrees from the host. For the next 0.2 seconds it searched 72 to 144 degrees. And so on until it completed a full 360 degrees search in one full second. However, this made the technique prone to leaving momentary blind spots, as at any given moment in time, while it searched one sector, it left 4 others blind open. And Leo, having researched this weakness of the ability before the finals began, had already formulated a strategy on how to exploit it. First, he created a footstep storm around Mikhail using Mirror World so that his real movement would not be given away by his steps. And then, once he was overwhelmed by the clones, Leo tactically slipped into his blind spot and began running at his top speed clockwise, as although he was running in just a 3-meter narrow radius around Mikhail, and the 2 at his top speed. At that radius, his speed let him stay ahead of each scan, slipping through the gaps in Mikhail's detection before it could ever lock on, making him completely invisible to his opponent. Stab, stab, stab. 3 more daggers hit Mikhail, this time along his hip, spine, and shoulder in rapid succession, as the impact sent him buckling to one knee, before he regained his footing and began limping wildly as his composure shattered. At this moment, Mikhail ran simply for the sake of running, as he felt like a sitting duck by fighting from the same spot where he was being repeatedly hit. However, this proved to be his final and costliest mistake. "Got you," Leo whispered coldly, as he reappeared into public view from Mikhail's blind side and rushed in for the kill, as he stabbed Mikhail on his back, before pulling his dagger down along the full length of his spine, to leave a long diagonal blow, that while wasn't lethal, made Mikhail feel like he was being torn in half. "Aghhh," Mikhail screamed, before falling face first into the sand, as Leo stood over him, waiting to deliver the finishing blow. "Ah, ah, aghhh," Mikhail screamed, writhing on the ground, as the amount of pain he felt in this moment numbed his mind and killed any desire he had left in him to continue this fight. I yield, he yelled like a bitch, as the referee called the match in Rodova's favor. "Winner, Leo Skyshard from Rodova," the referee declared, raising Leo's hand, as the Rodova crowd roared in approval. No one saw this dominant win coming. In fact, no one watched most of what happened in this match up till the final moment. However, it still pumped their blood. This was arguably Leo's most impressive performance yet, as he dismantled a Grandmaster opponent not through battle dominance but rather strategic brilliance. It's 3-2 for Rodova. Leo Skyshard pulls one back for his team. Derek shouted, nearly out of his seat. To be honest, I didn't see much of anything he did here, Lee added, shaking his head with a stunned expression. Just like the majority of the crowd. But judging by how terrified Mikhail looked by the end of it, it must have been something damn impressive. Impressive is putting it lightly, Lee, Derek replied. He dismantled a Grandmaster level fighter without a scratch on him. That's almost unheard of for a finals match. Yeah, I don't think anyone expected this sort of dominance from the youngsters. But it looks like Rodova's first years are better than their seniors, so even if Rodova doesn't win the cup this year, I'm sure they will be happy to know that they have absolute superstars at their hands for the next year, Lee muttered, as the Rodova section roared at the top of their lungs, cheering Leo on. But before their adrenaline could settle, the next fighter stepped out from Geneva's bench. And the cheers turned into murmurs of confusion. Wait a second, Derek said. That's Damien. Damien the Tank, Lee confirmed, frowning. He already fought in the second match and suffered a slight bruised ankle, but Geneva's sending him back out. Interesting choice, Derek murmured. They've still got a fresh Grandmasters left in Darnell, but instead, they're sending Damien out once again. It's smart, actually, Lee said after a pause. Leo just breezed past his first opponent easily. If you throw Darnell at him now and he wins again, Geneva would be under real pressure. However, by sending in Damien, Captain Ramos ensures that he will be forced to burn more energy and drain his stamina. And then even if Damien loses, Derek finished, Leo won't walk away from that fight unscathed and will be a sitting duck for the next fighter. Geneva's not trying to win it all in the next fight, they're ensuring that they do in the next two. Exactly, Lee nodded. They're playing the long game. Let Damien soften him up. Let him drag Leo through the sand. And then, when he's bleeding, tired, and exposed, drop Geneva's finisher on him. It's a solid strategy. With no one to rely on the bench, Leo is facing an uphill battle from here on out for sure. Meanwhile, on the battlefield, Damien rolled his shoulders, cracked his knuckles, and let out a deep exhale as he stomped toward the center again, his massive shield in hand, his gait slower, as he limped because of the ankle injury he received while facing Minerva. Across from him, Leo stood with both daggers drawn, body loose and eyes locked, as he observed every movement Damien made. His weight's still shifting to the right. The limp isn't feigned. Mobility's compromised, but his upper body looks solid. If he plants his feet, he turns into a fortress. Leo assessed coldly. Normally, he would have treated a limp like that as bait, a lure to draw him in. But in this case, he'd seen Minerva's arrow sink into Damien's shin with his own eyes. So for now, he trusted it was real. And he planned to exploit it. Both fighters ready. Begin. The referee's voice cracked across the arena, and Leo moved. Not explosively, but rather with a relaxed jog, as he closed down the distance between himself and Damien at once. Jogging to your own death, boy. How interesting, Damien taunted, as Leo suddenly picked up speed and surged forward, before leaping slightly towards the left, as Damien reacted instantly to the danger. He raised his shield and squared his stance, bringing his body to the ready, expecting a full-speed charge. So he wants to trade early, Damien thought, tightening his core, already preparing to counter with a backhand bash the moment Leo entered his radius. But Leo didn't enter. Instead, he stopped mid-run and angled his lunge toward Damien's rear leg, the injured one, as he completely changed his direction at the last second, before exploding forward with such insane speed that Damien's shield couldn't follow him there, not fast enough. Shit, he's targeting the limp. Damien realized, as he twisted his hips to adjust while also swinging the edge of the shield back to intercept, but Leo was already out of his range by then. Shing! A dagger slashed across the back of Damien's exposed calf, as although the cut wasn't deep, it was clean and reopened a painful wound that had barely stopped bleeding just moments ago. Gah! Damien grunted and stomped down hard, trying to pivot into a counterstrike, but his weight transfer lagged, the injured ankle buckling under pressure. He's baiting movement I can't physically match. That bastard's not just fast, he's calculated, Damien realized at this moment, as he saw Leo already backing away in a diagonal retreat to avoid the shield's range, circling again without ever turning his back. You think this is how you win, Skyshard? He growled. By poking and dancing like a coward? He asked in agitation, as Leo refused to respond. Instead, he simply moved again. This time he feinted left, causing Damien to shift his weight and pivot his shield in anticipation, before vanishing behind that momentum and darting right. Mid-movement, Leo drew his elbow back and raked his dagger across Damien's right tricep, dragging the blade just enough to draw blood before pushing off and springing away again. Clang! Asterisk. Damien slammed his shield into the space Leo had just vacated, a quarter second too slow. As the crowd started to catch on now. I don't think Skyshard is even trying to land a big cut here. Lee said. I think he knows it's too dangerous to do that, so he's just harassing Damien instead with these surgical jabs, before retreating out of range. He's matadoring him, Lee, Derek replied. Death by 1,000 cuts. He knows he can't overpower Damien's defense, so he's breaking the body around it. Derek added, as that's exactly what Leo did for the next 30 minutes, as he slowly but methodically accumulated slashes on Damien's body, one after another, with none being too big. However, after getting hit by 100 of them, the cumulative damage was significant. Stop dancing like a monkey and fight me properly, Damien shouted in agitation as Leo pulled away from him after delivering yet another shallow cut to his arm, which while stung slightly, did not hurt him in any meaningful fashion at all. However, Leo paid no heed to Damien's rant. He knew that what he was doing was the best way to slowly whittle down a tank. And while it wasn't the most glamorous way to fight, nor the most crowd-pleasing, it was still extremely effective. By fighting this way, he was straining his own stamina reserves big time. Yes, but in return, he was rendering Damien's entire offense kit useless. The tank class came with its trade-offs, and while it had high defense and stability, their offensive abilities weren't designed for speedy duels, as they were built to punish opponents who got caught in their bulky charges. However, it was impossible for Leo to fall for such a trick. He was simply too nimble and sharp to be hit by a skill like Shield Advance or Bulwark Crash, and Captain Ramos knew this as well. Damien was in a way the worst matchup for Geneva to send against Leo. However, they were never counting on him to win, and always only counting on him to tire Leo out, which he was doing wonderfully, by surviving as long as he did without moving, while his opponent was constantly on the hunt at his top speed. Hold on Damien. Tire him out more so that I can come and finish him next round and take all the glory, Ramos prayed from the stands, as although he maintained a straight expression on his face, internally he prayed for Damien's downfall as much as any Rodova fan. Damien knew that the situation he was currently in was far from ideal, as every second that passed only served to reinforce the harsh reality that he had no control over the pace of this battle, nor any clear path to victory. He was, by nature and training, a hyper-defensive fighter, built like a wall and armed with a style that relied on enduring punishment until the perfect moment to unleash a counter-strike presented itself. However, Leo fought in a way that completely dismantled the foundation of that style, as he moved with such relentless speed, surgical precision, and untraceable timing that there was simply no opportunity to land even a single retaliatory blow. Damien knew he didn't need much, he just needed just one clean hit to shift the momentum in his favor, as his class was designed around that singular moment of impact. But Leo gave him nothing. Frustratingly, every time he slammed his shield into the ground or spun into a wide counter, he found only empty space in front of him, as Leo would have already danced 5 steps away, composed, unreadable, and entirely in control. And after 30 minutes of this helpless dance, his patience began to crack. He tried to stand tall and keep his breathing steady, but his legs were beginning to ache from bracing in place for too long, while the sweat dripping from his temples soaked the inside of his collar, making the metal feel heavier than usual. His eyes twitched, scanning for a pattern, Anything to break this rhythm, but the only thing he found was Leo's silhouette circling him like a ghost that refused to engage directly. And for Damien, that was the worst part. He wasn't just losing the fight, he was being denied the fight altogether. I just need one hit, he whispered under his breath, not for Leo, but for himself, as if saying it out loud would somehow will the opening into existence. But 5 more minutes passed by and the opening never came. And so, cornered by frustration, fatigue, and a rising sense of humiliation, Damien made a decision that every fiber of his training screamed against. Fuck it, he roared, snapping completely as he lunged forward, not with a composed charge or structured formation, but with brute force and blind instinct, throwing the full weight of his shielded frame toward Leo in a wild, unbalanced rush. The crowd gasped in unison, as Derek's voice rang out in shock, he's going for it. A full-body shield charge, but that's not shield advance, it's completely unstructured. Lee leaned forward, his expression tense. It's desperation, Derek. He's abandoned form entirely. That shield's not attacking, it's flailing. And Leo, watching from the edge of Damien's momentum, saw the breakdown for exactly what it was. He gave up patience, and with it, his only advantage. For the first time in the fight, Leo didn't dodge backward. Instead, he stepped forward, eyes locked, body still, as he activated Celestial Veil, allowing Damien's crashing charge to bounce off him, as he stopped his momentum at once. And in that single second, the entire match unraveled. Once Damien stopped, Leo reappeared on his blind side, low and coiled, driving his dagger horizontally across the back of both knees, slicing clean through the muscle and sending Damien's massive frame lurching forward uncontrollably. Before the tank could even fully drop, Leo pivoted and delivered a ruthless follow-up, not a lethal blow, but a sharp strike to the base of the neck with the blunt hilt of his dagger, which sent Damien sprawling face first into the sand with a dull, armor-muffled thud. The silence was immediate, before it broke into a roar. Winner, Leo Skyshard of Rodova. The referee announced, raising his hand as the Rodova section erupted with disbelief and joy. He did it again. Derek gasped, barely able to contain the emotion in his voice. Leo Skyshard just dismantled one of the most powerful tanks in the tournament without taking a single clean hit. And not through power, Lee added, shaking his head. Through brilliance. Through patience. Through utter control. He let Damien bleed with 1,000 cuts and let him collapse in his own frustration, before delivering the perfect counter. Leo said nothing as he walked back to his side of the field, his posture composed, his expression unreadable, and his daggers still drawn, just in case. And as the camera cut to Geneva's bench, the crowd caught a glimpse of Captain Ramos, his hands folded, his eyes narrowed, not surprised, but amused, as if the outcome of this fight did not displease him at all. The kid is trying to look tough, he's actively trying to suppress breathing hard, to not show weakness, but I can see the erratic breathing pattern. After every couple breaths that he takes short, he takes a long one to meet his body's oxygen demands, showing that he's actually very tired, Ramos thought, as he got up from the bench and stretched slightly. Could it be that Captain Ramos is coming himself? Derek wondered, as Ramos left the bench and began making his way down the tunnel, amongst a ruckus from Geneva supporters. Oh my God, it is. Captain Ramos steps up next. They're still not sending Darnell, Lee commented in awe, as the camera cut to a shot of Darnell sitting on the bench, his face still curled in his usual innocent smile. Dash 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 dash. Roar. As Ramos made his way toward the starting spot, the Geneva supporters exploded with energy, cheering loud enough to shake the stands, as their excitement seemed to be reignited by the appearance of their captain. Ramos, though visibly injured and still bleeding from his earlier clash with Yu Shen, walked with his usual swagger, his smile wide, his confidence untouched, as if none of the damage mattered. You've fought well so far, Skyshard, Ramos said casually, brushing a smear of blood off his cheek. I acknowledge you as a brilliant fighter. He paused, just long enough to make sure the cameras caught the grin on his face before continuing. It's just a shame you chose to join a second-rate academy like Rodova instead of Geneva. A talent like yours, hell, even Yu Shen and Su Yong, they'd always be welcome at Geneva. Leo narrowed his eyes. What a cliché speech, he thought with a flicker of disgust, as he raised his hand without hesitation and made a simple gesture toward the referee. Substitution. The crowd fell into momentary confusion as the referee turned to confirm, and nodded. Rodova requests a substitution. Leo Skyshard will walk out and Enzo from Rodova will step in. As the crowd murmured and the commentators scrambled to explain the timing of the move, Leo slowly turned and made his way off the arena floor. Every step felt heavier than the last, though he did well to keep his gait sharp and composed. I can't let them see it. Not Ramos. Not the crowd. Not even my own shadow, Leo thought, as he kept up the act of looking tough and unharmed, but inside, he was exhausted. 2 stamina-draining battles back-to-back with no time to rest and no proper cooldown had left him feeling tired. He was moving at his top speed for both battles, and it wasn't just simple movement like running in circles, but complex movements where he had to break his momentum, change directions, roll, jump and do a dozen other things, for several minutes at once. And as a result, after the 2 bouts, his muscles ached in places he rarely felt. The joints in his knees felt like they'd been slowly filed down by the sand beneath his feet. And while his expression remained unreadable and his steps stayed straight, inside, he was very aware of how little he had left in the tank. Damn, I need a breather, Leo thought, as he knew that he needed a few minutes at best, as his passive skill faster recovery would help him regain his energy quickly. Just a few minutes, even a single bout to let his heart rate drop, let the sharp edge of fatigue dull before he stepped back in. As he knew Ramos wasn't bluffing. The man looked half broken, but Leo could tell. There was enough gas in that engine to be a serious threat. So as he sat on the bench, eyes on Enzo stepping up for what would likely be a quick skirmish, Leo allowed his fingers to unclench, his shoulders to drop just a hair, as he focused entirely on breathing and recovery. I need 5 minutes, Enzo. Just 5. Give me 5 and I'll send Ramos packing. That much I promise, Leo said, as Enzo gave him a shaky nod, before making his way down the tunnel. Enzo's POV. Enzo walked out to the ring, looking extremely nervous, as he fumbled with the edge of his robes and walked in short, uncertain steps, his boots dragging awkwardly across the sand and creating an uneven rhythm that made the Geneva supporters burst into laughter. Some pointed and hollered. Others whistled mockingly. A few even mimicked his walk with exaggerated limp steps of their own. It didn't help that Enzo looked like he was walking to his own execution, which, in a way, he was. Look at him, Derek, Lee said with a tone halfway between pity and amusement. That's not a man coming out to win a fight. That's a man who drew the shortest straw in the Rodova locker room. He's been sent out for one reason and one reason only, Derek replied, eyes narrowing as the camera cut to Leo sitting on the bench with a towel over his shoulders. To buy time for Skyshard. The question is, how much time can he really give? I'd say, 30 seconds at best, Lee said without hesitation. That's being generous. Even the strongest master-level fighter stands no chance against a Grandmaster. And Ramos isn't just any Grandmaster, he's Geneva's captain. This matchup is suicide. Back on the field, Ramos stood with his arms crossed, shoulders relaxed, wearing a smirk that screamed boredom. His dual blades were sheathed at his hips, but the casual tilt of his head and the half-step he took forward made one thing very clear: he was going to enjoy this fight very much. Then, as Enzo finally arrived at his starting spot, the referee raised a hand, before looking at both fighters as he said, "Fighters, ready." Ramos unsheathed his blades with a smooth, slow motion, the steel hissing against leather as the sun caught the edge of their polish. He twirled one once, then held both out to his sides with precise balance, as his eyes locked onto Enzo like a hawk watching a rat cross an empty field, before switching to the referee as he gave him a nod. Meanwhile Enzo, who had been avoiding eye contact with Ramos until that very moment, finally looked up, only to see death personified staring right at him. And he trembled, visibly. Then, as he reached toward his own belt with shaky fingers, they brushed against nothing but air, as his expression shifted from fear to confusion, and then to panic. "Ref!" Enzo shouted, raising his hand like a schoolboy asking to use the bathroom. "I think I forgot my blade in the locker room. I'm not ready, please let me go grab it." A full beat of silence followed. Then, "Are you kidding me?" The referee exploded, veins bulging in his forehead as the entire stadium erupted in mixture of laughter and boos at once. "How the hell do you forget your weapon before a finals match?" It was a genuine mistake, I swear," Enzo added with a sheepish grin, scratching the back of his head. "Please just give me like 2 minutes. This is outrageous," Ramos barked, stepping forward. "He's stalling. You expect me to believe he just forgot his weapon? Oh, this is embarrassing for sure," the referee growled, pointing at Enzo with barely contained rage, "but I can't legally start the match if one fighter is unarmed. So hurry the hell up and get it." As the Rodova fans chuckled and the Geneva supporters booed with a mix of fury and mockery, Enzo gave a clumsy bow and jogged back toward the tunnel, tripping once on his way and drawing even louder jeers from the crowd. Lee sighed into his mic. "This is pathetic. Ramos is right, this has to be deliberate. He's wasting time," Derek agreed, though his tone had an edge of curiosity beneath the criticism. "But if that's his plan, well, then maybe it's not so pathetic after all. Because in reality, every wobbling step, every fumbled motion, every second Enzo had stood on that arena floor had been done with one purpose in mind: stalling." Between the painfully slow walkout and the forgotten blade fiasco, he had already burned nearly 2 full minutes off the clock. 2 out of the 5 Leo had requested. And while it may have made him look like a complete idiot to the entire universe, Enzo didn't care. Because if playing the fool meant giving his team a chance to win, then he was ready to play the fool to perfection. Meanwhile Yu Shen watched the match unfold from a compact monitor inside the infirmary's recovery bay, his torso still wrapped in tight bandages and his breath shallow from the ribs Ramos had cracked in their earlier fight. And yet, despite the pain that flared every time he shifted, he couldn't stop the small smile tugging at the edge of his lips as he watched Enzo trip over his own bootlaces for the second time on the walk back to the tunnel. There he goes again, Yu Shen thought fondly, as the memory of a very different Enzo resurfaced with vivid clarity. It was the 4th day of the hellish summer camp, what the instructors liked to call Temper Week. A relentless gauntlet of physical drills, mental warfare, and 72-hour no-sleep rotations meant to break spirits and identify leaders. They were on a night ambush simulation. Pitch-black forest terrain, minimal gear, 30 students split into 6 teams. The objective: infiltrate a guarded supply base. Yu Shen had been assigned team leader of a misfit squad with no standout talents. They were tired, uncoordinated, and one of them, Enzo, had somehow gotten his foot stuck in a rabbit hole 30 seconds into the exercise and managed to alert 2 scouting instructors with a yelp that sounded like a dying squirrel. The entire team was caught, tied to trees with their capture times noted in big red ink on the scoreboard. They were humiliated. The next morning, while everyone sulked and blamed each other, Enzo stood up, still bleary-eyed, still limping, and raised his hand. "If you're gonna blame someone, make it me. It was my screw-up. But if you're gonna laugh at someone, laugh properly," he said, and then, without warning, he slapped a leaf on his head, stuffed grass in his mouth, and began mimicking the instructor's patrol calls like a lunatic, flapping around like a forest pigeon. He did that to ensure that the team laughed and moved on from the previous day's humiliation and focused properly on the coming day's tasks, and thanks to him, that's exactly what happened. The squad burst out laughing seeing him flap around, and even the instructors had to turn away in embarrassment. But it was in that moment, as Yu Shen watched a kid who had very few skills, no standout power, and no exceptional finesse, diffuse the tension of an entire failed mission with nothing but shameless humor and a stubborn refusal to quit, that Yu Shen made up his mind that he needed him as a teammate. "He's not strong or fast. If we go on talent alone, you can probably get much better individuals to join the team, Yu Shen had said later that week to the coaches, but he's the one guy who'll never panic when it matters. And if you give him a role he understands, he'll play it to the end, no matter what it costs him. Now, watching Enzo stall a grandmaster in the world's biggest tournament final, not with strength, but with stupidity so committed it had become brilliance, Yu Shen chuckled softly and muttered. And that's why you're here. He leaned back against the cot, closed his eyes for just a moment, and whispered. Keep buying Leo time, Enzo. We're all counting on it. Sky God Arena, Finals Match 6, Ramos vs Enzo. Eventually, Enzo did have to return to his starting spot, and the referee, after one final exasperated glare, raised his hand and called for the match to begin, as Ramos wasted no time whatsoever, exploding forward with the full authority of a grandmaster who had no intention of dragging things out. He came in low, fast, and tight, blades drawn in reverse grips, footsteps smooth despite his earlier injuries, closing the distance like a panther zeroing in on a limping deer. But before Ramos could even swing, Enzo turned and bolted, not with some deceptive movement, not with a feint, not with any sort of dramatic flourish. Just raw, unashamed retreat. He sprinted sideways at full speed, kicking up clouds of sand behind him as he moved in an awkward zigzag that made it almost impossible to predict his trajectory, as though even Enzo himself hadn't fully committed to where he was headed. What the? Ramos muttered under his breath, halting his initial strike as he turned to follow. Is he seriously running? Derek asked, stunned, as the crowd burst into laughter. Not even trying to engage, Lee replied, voice halfway between amusement and pity. This isn't a strategy, Derek, this is evasion. Pure evasion. But Enzo had no shame left to sacrifice. He was past that point. Because he knew what his role was. He wasn't here to fight. He wasn't here to win. He was here to delay Ramos for as long as humanly possible. And if that meant looking like a headless chicken sprinting in circles around the arena, then so be it. Every second he stayed alive was one more second Leo had to breathe. One more second to recover. One more second closer to victory. Don't get greedy, he told himself, weaving past the edge of the arena again as Ramos caught up and slashed out with a horizontal sweep, one that Enzo ducked beneath with a clumsy roll, before scrambling to his feet again with zero finesse. Don't try to land a hit. Don't try to counter. Just live. And somehow, he kept doing just that. Ramos, for all his speed and technique, was still a grandmaster loaded in gear and weaponry, carrying slight weight to slow him down ever so slightly. And Enzo, for all his lack of power, was still a sponsorless, armorless, master with nothing weighing him down except the rising burn in his lungs and the pounding of his heart. You're joking, Ramos muttered, trying to corner him against the arena's edge, as he caught up to him once more. Only for Enzo to suddenly turn and throw a handful of sand in his eyes, which he could never have predicted. The fuck? Ramos muttered, flinching instinctively. As although his mind knew that a handful of sand would do nothing to him, avoiding it was an instinct from childhood, and in the heat of the battle he flinched instinctively, allowing Enzo to dive and bolt once again, as he bought himself a few more seconds. You want to waste my time? Ramos called after him, his voice rising with irritation. You think I won't catch up to you? But Enzo didn't answer. He couldn't. Because if he tried to open his mouth right now, he'd probably throw up from exhaustion. And still, he kept running. For 1 minute, then 2. At the 2.5-minute mark, Ramos clipped him, just barely, with the flat of his blade across the shoulder, sending Enzo tumbling to the ground in a sprawl of limbs and robes. But before Ramos could finish him, Enzo scrambled back to his feet with every ounce of will he had left in him, stumbling now, but still moving. Still buying time. He's insane, Lee whispered. He's actually doing it. He's made it past 2.5 minutes into this bout and he hasn't even drawn his blade once. This isn't a fight, Derek muttered, almost reverently. It's a sacrifice. By now, even the crowd had gone quiet. They had mocked him, booed him, laughed at him, but now, they were watching, because what they were seeing was no longer funny. It was brave, it was foolish, and somehow, it was working. Ramos, however, had had enough. Fine, he hissed. You want to run? Run in hell, he growled, activating Blade Crescent and hurling a mana-charged arc of slashing energy toward Enzo's path. And this time the fight ended clean. Slash. Asterisk. Enzo couldn't outrun the attack, and was left deeply injured by it, as he screamed and stumbled to the ground, his very life hanging by a thin thread. Match over. Winner Gu Ramos of Geneva, the referee announced at that moment, as he signaled for the medics to rush in. As Ramos looked almost too pissed even in victory. In the end, he had to use a mana-based move to take down a master-level fighter, and the two after wasting almost 3 full minutes. It was by no means an ideal performance for him, and although he did not struggle at all in this fight, even victory tasted bitter when it came at the cost of chasing a master across sand for 3 full minutes. On the bench, Leo stood up with a blank expression, the towel sliding off his shoulders as he rolled his neck once and cracked his knuckles, before heading toward the tunnel again. Thank you, he muttered under his breath as he looked at the clock. 5 minutes and 2 seconds. Leo saw, as a big grin spread on his face. As somehow, in the end, Enzo had managed to buy him the time he asked for and a couple seconds more as a bonus. All right, since you kept your promise, I'll keep mine now, Leo thought, walking out to the arena, as having had a few minutes to rest, he no longer felt as fatigued as before and was ready to face Gu Ramos with a second wind. And the score is 4-3 for Geneva. This finals keeps getting better and better, Derek said, watching the medics carry Enzo off the field, his voice a mix of disbelief and awe. He didn't land a single hit. He didn't even try. But he gave Leo exactly what he needed. Yeah, Lee replied slowly, the weight of the moment finally settling into his tone. For all the mockery he got walking out, Enzo just gave Rodova their last shot at this tournament. It's all on Leo now. Exactly. Ramos is injured, there's no denying that, Derek continued, nodding slowly. He took some serious damage in the first round against Yushen. Meanwhile Leo, he's fresh off 5 minutes of rest and he doesn't have a scratch on his body. He's got no injuries, he's got his full kit of skills still at his disposal and he's probably the only one left in this tournament with enough stamina to fight 2 full matches if needed, Lee admitted, folding his arms. If anyone from Rodova can pull this off, it's him. But that's a big if though, Derek added grimly. Because we've already seen Ramos take Yushen apart in the opening match, and if Yushen couldn't finish him, I don't see how Leo does. No matter how flashy or calculated his last 2 wins were. Let's just say, hypothetically, he does manage to beat Ramos, Lee began, glancing at the Geneva bench where Darnell sat, still smiling. Even if he pulls that off, Derek cut in, shaking his head, he still has to go through Darnell Nuna. Geneva's finisher and the inheritor of the Black Serpent way of fighting. So, he definitely has a mountain to climb. 2 miracle wins already, but he needs 2 more to put Rodova over the line. Sky God Arena, Finals Match 7, Leo vs Ramos. Ramos did not ask for a substitution after his fight with Enzo. He had no intention of stepping aside, not when the final spotlight was within reach. Internally, he was dead set on ending the tournament here and now, by striking down Leo and claiming the glory of securing Geneva's championship with his own hands. As he desperately wanted the headlines, the post-match interviews and the winning photographs to be all about him and him alone, and not the team. And for that goal, he stayed, although substituting might have been the best choice to make. Can't run away from me anymore, Skyshard, Ramos muttered with a grin as Leo approached, as he dropped into battle stance and shifted his weight forward. In response, Leo unsheathed 2 daggers of his own from across his waist before lowering his stance into that signature crouch of his, where he kept his shoulders loose, eyes cold and balance perfect. The air grew taut with tension, as the whole arena held its breath. Fighters ready, the referee called out, eyes flicking left. Then right. A pause. And then his hand dropped. Begin. There was no delay. No cautious circling. No test strikes. as both fighters launched into each other like loaded springs. Ramos came in first, low and coiled, his blades crossing in an X/ meant to split through Leo's defense before he could establish tempo, but Leo twisted mid-sprint, angling just outside the arc and countering with a dagger thrust aimed at the side of Ramos's ribs. Clang! Asterisk. Steel met steel as Ramos parried clean, his second blade already rising into a backhand meant to punish the approach, but Leo disengaged just in time, feet skidding across the sand as he absorbed the force with nimble precision before resetting his stance. He hadn't been hit, but he'd been pushed back, and that told him everything he needed to know about Ramos's raw strength. He's stronger. Way stronger than anyone I've faced before. Leo realized, as he narrowed his eyes, flexing the strain out of his arms. Not just in raw power, but also in the way he controls space around him, he's at a level where he can easily defeat Major Hen in battle. Leo thought, as he charged again, but this time not head-on. He shifted right, then cut left, moving in zigzags like a flickering shadow, trying to angle for the blind side, but Ramos rotated smoothly with him, blades moving in controlled arcs, as he intercepted every attempt with calm efficiency. "You thought I'd be as weak as Mikhail," Ramos called, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Or as slow as Damien." He cracked his neck. "I wouldn't be captain of Geneva if I was anywhere close to those two. Being captain means you're the best fighter on your team by far, and that's exactly who I am," Ramos said, as he flexed his mana that pulsed through the arena floor, before activating his first move. Steelbound step. Whoosh! A burst of mana launched him forward in a blur, closing the distance instantly as he appeared right at Leo's side with a vertical cleave already mid-swing. Shua! Leo barely ducked in time, the blade whistling past his ear close enough to shave the wind off his skin, as he kicked off the ground with a sharp recoil, landing low and spinning back into a wide arc to disengage, but Ramos didn't let up. Not for a second. Steelbound step didn't just accelerate movement, it reinforced Ramos's footwork, tightening his pivot radius and anchoring his weight, allowing him to brake and accelerate again in unnatural sequences. Which meant that even when Leo disengaged, Ramos was already on him again. Clang! Asterisk! Clang! Asterisk! Two furious exchanges rang out in succession as Leo barely deflected twin slashes, the impact sending reverberations through his wrist bones as he rolled sideways to recover, using blade switch to reposition 10 meters away and catch his breath. But Ramos didn't chase this time. He just stood there, blades lowered, exhaling through his nose, as if waiting. As if daring Leo to come again. He's not just aggressive, he's reading me. Reacting one move ahead. He's used to fighting speedsters, and shutting them down, Leo thought, his eyes narrowing slightly, chest rising and falling now in sharper cadence as he processed what he'd just felt. Ramos wasn't faster than him in terms of pure speed, however, he was surely better timed. It was like he was doing what Leo did in battle, which was to read the opponent's movement before they made it by looking at their muscle contractions, but only better and faster than him, as he seemed to always be one step ahead. And that was more dangerous than him having explosive raw speed, as while Leo could handle speed, such battle IQ was hard to counter. Every time I try to angle in, he rotates clean. Every disengage, he takes the center back. He's not chasing me, he's steering me, Leo realized, before rushing in again, but this time, he didn't aim for a clean strike. Instead, he darted in with feints, 2 jabs low, 1 mid, none committed, and the moment Ramos bit on the second parry, Leo used blade switch mid-motion to vanish and reappear behind him, angling for a stab at the kidneys. Clink! Asterisk. But Ramos twisted without looking, using the flat of his secondary blade to catch the stab with his elbow already bending to slam into Leo's ribs. Thump! Asterisk. The hit landed. Leo grunted and skidded back with a cough, the impact knocking the wind from his lungs as he gritted his teeth and ran back for reset, but not before Ramos advanced again, now smiling wide. Finally landed one, Ramos said. "You're slippery, I'll give you that. But you're also a one-trick pony. Your fast repositioning is hard to deal with if one isn't tracking where you've thrown your daggers, but if you're tracking that, it's pretty easy to know where you'll show up, Ramos said, as he enjoyed watching Leo spit a small mouthful of blood. That damage isn't major, but him having figured out the blade switch is a pain, Leo thought, as he felt pissed at having one of his core moves being seen through. However, he did not panic just yet, as he knew that he hadn't shown all his cards either. And on the flip side, Leo also found out something important about Ramos. He had opened strong. Too strong. He's overexerting to end this quickly because he doesn't have the stamina to go on at this pace for long. He's wincing in pain whenever he moves, and is trying his best to mask it. He's definitely hurt from his fight against Yushen, and the longer this fight drags on, the bigger disadvantage he will be in, Leo thought, finally settling his breath as he shifted his stance again, shoulders now tilted and low, blades closer to his chest. Ramos was without a doubt the strongest opponent he had faced yet. An opponent where he saw no easy openings to exploit. However, he did not feel intimidated by him either. Somehow, he had faith that if he dug in deep and did his best, he could definitely beat Ramos, and hence he decided to bet on himself and take this fight deep instead of going for a decisive finisher. Sky God Arena, Finals Match 7. For the next 5 minutes, Ramos upped the ante against Leo, pressing down on him relentlessly, as he tried his best to dismantle Leo's defense. Clang, clang, clash, clash, blade clashed against blade, steel clashed against steel, as Leo barely parried the constant flurry of strikes coming his way. However, the constant blocking took its toll on him, with the vibrations from Ramos's powerful attacks numbing his wrists and forearms, making each subsequent parry feel heavier than the last. And Ramos sensed this gap too, his veteran senses able to perceive Leo growing a quarter step slower, as he immediately activated Rapid Slash to capitalize. Whir! His blades blurred into motion, tracing shallow arcs meant not to kill, but to pierce and bleed, that disrupted Leo's stance and forced an error. Slash, slash, block. The move paid off, as Leo's block staggered a fraction too wide, allowing Ramos to slide a cut across his left shoulder, then another across the waist a heartbeat later. Wince. Leo winced at the sharp stings, blood drawn from the cuts as his momentum stifled, but he did not yield. Instead, he stayed within range, forcing Ramos to keep swinging, as he refused to give Ramos the distance he needed to deliver a killing strike. Leo did not even try to win this fight at this moment, as instead he stuck to his strategy of enduring till Ramos burned out. Because Leo could see the desperation behind every move Ramos had made so far, even if the crowd or the commentators couldn't, as although it looked like Ramos was dominating this fight, in truth, he was just trying to win fast before his body gave out. Every time he surged, it was with the full weight of someone who couldn't afford to drag this match out, and every technique he used was overcharged, carrying more mana than necessary as he was desperate. And watching all this firsthand, Leo became mentally assured that Ramos wasn't conserving energy here. That he was accelerating towards the finish line, having faith in his ability to finish the fight before his body gave out. However, if only Leo held on for a bit longer, he could definitely make him pay for such a bold approach. You're banking on ending this before I adapt, before your legs give in, but that won't happen. I'm going to outlast you. Leo thought, adjusting his stance again, blades angled for quicker deflections now rather than full-on blocks. Moon Dive. Ramos activated his next move at this moment, a sweeping shoulder-first charge that used the flat of one blade for cover while the second arm was retracted for a follow-up strike meant to pin Leo mid-evade. It was a move built for fighters who dodged backward. But Leo ducked inward. He bent low, letting the charge pass just inches above his head as he threw his weight sideways into a short roll, letting the second blade scrape against his arm as he barely avoided the full arc. It hurt, being nicked by the opponent's blade, but it was still within the bounds of what he could tolerate. Thud. Ramos spun to chase the retreat, his expression narrowing as frustration leaked through his previous confident mask. And Leo saw it too. The faint twitch in his left leg. The way his stance reset just a beat slower, and the way his shoulder roll had lost some of its previous crispness. He's burning out. Leo realized, his confidence bolstering. However, although it seemed like he was on his way to burning out, Ramos wasn't done quite just yet. Wind Shredder. With a growl, Ramos activated another technique, this one a ranged wind arc blast launched from a slash overhead, the wave splitting the sand in its path as it roared toward Leo. Leo prepared to dodge, but this attack was too close, too fast, and too wide for him to dodge effectively. So instead, he braced. Celestial Veil. Mana surged outward from Leo's core, wrapping his body in a shimmering film of translucent force that deflected the incoming arc with a deafening impact. Boom! Sand exploded outward as the force of the attack collided with his barrier, and then seconds later when it settled, Leo was still standing inside, unharmed, as it seemed like his barrier had outlasted Ramos's attack in the end. A nice trick, but now block this, Ramos said, as he burst through the dust cloud with both blades raised high, his expression feral, his arms coiled for a finishing blow. But Leo wasn't retreating this time. He had seen what he needed to see. He had waited for as long as he needed to wait, and this was finally the moment he had been waiting for. As the tipping point was finally here. Phantom Bloom. Ramos activated Phantom Bloom, the same move he had used to defeat Yu Shen, whereby his body blurred into two distinct afterimages, one darting left, the other one right, making a fighter confused on which was the real one. However, Leo did not play his game. Having anticipated that he would use Phantom Bloom when he was at his most desperate, Leo countered by using Blade Switch as he teleported 25 meters away, escaping Ramos's area of effect completely, as he rendered his special move useless. Coward! Ramos yelled, as both his afterimages merged into one once again. However, Leo did not care. Leo had seen how erratically Ramos was breathing now, and how the wounds he had received against Yu Shen were now acting up again, making his movements slower. As Leo made the leap of faith and activated 1,000 phantom slashes at this moment. Leo's form blurred for a single breath, and then, he was everywhere. Dozens of him, dishing out dozens of slashes. Afterimages bloomed around Ramos like a sudden storm, each one flickering in and out of sight with terrifying unpredictability. Some came from above, some from the side, others from seemingly impossible angles as Leo's real form danced through them, indistinguishable from the mirage. At this moment, Ramos turned sharply, raising his blades in defense, as clang. A strike collided with his shoulder. He spun and clang, another one deflected off his leg. But when he swept a blade in a wide arc, hoping to counter, it caught nothing but air as Ramos panicked. Which one is real? Ramos hissed, his voice now laced with alarm as he pivoted frantically, trying to lock onto the rhythm. But there wasn't one. That was the genius of it. 1,000 phantom slashes didn't rely on sequence, it thrived on chaos. It wasn't about landing a fatal blow with brute power, it was about suffocating the opponent in uncertainty. And Leo, having spent the past 20 minutes studying Ramos's timing, reactions, and pivot preferences, unleashed the technique with such pinpoint precision, that each slash he unleashed was placed not to strike, but to force Ramos's footwork into compromised patterns. Clang, asterisk, clink, asterisk, whiff, asterisk, clang, asterisk. The Geneva captain was deflecting by instinct now. Not by plan, as his rhythm was visibly broken. And Leo saw it. The twitch in the wrist. The stagger in the backstep. The slightly too wide swing of the right blade. Ramos was no longer responding to Leo, he was reacting to phantoms, his eyes already horrified by this unknown variable. This wasn't in my data sheet. I've never seen or heard about you using this move before, don't tell me you hit it all the way to the finals, Ramos said in shock, as Leo closed in. Strike by strike, fake by fake, the real Leo drew closer, and then. Slash, asterisk. One slash landed deep, right across Ramos's ribs. The real one. Ramos gasped, stumbling backward with a wide-eyed expression as blood soaked into his side, as Leo's real form carved his body open like it were a pumpkin. Slash, 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 slash. Leo turned him into a helpless ragdoll, as he sliced open every major vein, every major artery in his body, turning him into a standing blood fountain, with him unable to so much as lift a finger in response. "You tricked me," Ramos muttered in disbelief before collapsing. As Leo didn't respond with words. Instead, he just stepped forward, calm, precise, and drove the hilt of his dagger into Ramos's solar plexus, knocking him out cold. "Winner, Leo Skyshard of RODOVA." The referee declared at that moment, as the crowd didn't cheer right away. They were stunned to do so. And then, roar, asterisk. Rodova's section erupted like a volcano as the referee raised Leo's hand in victory. Cheers cascaded across the arena like a tidal wave, drowning out even the announcers for a moment as the stadium rocked with applause. Nobody had expected Leo to take down Gu Ramos, Geneva's captain, but against all odds he had, and now the score was 4-4, with everything on the line for the final battle. This was without a doubt the closest circuits finals in the past 2 decades, and Leo Skyshard was the main character of it, having led Rodova from certain defeat to almost the cusp of victory. Sky God Arena, commentary booth. He wouldn't do it, would he? He can't, Derek exhaled, his voice low, the disbelief still clinging to his tone. I mean, he's bruised and battered, there's no way he can take on a fresh fighter, but there's no way he should have defeated Gu Ramos either. And although I know he can't, something about the boy makes me hope that he just may. Lee didn't respond right away. His arms were folded across his chest, eyes fixed on the screen as the camera zoomed in on Leo, still standing alone in the center of the arena, half soaked in sweat and blood, but silent. Unflinching. That's the danger of fighters like him, Lee said finally. They're not the strongest, nor the most experienced, but they have this depth about themselves that can't be gauged, as they keep pulling off things they shouldn't be capable of, and somewhere along the line, you stop betting against them. Well, you can't deny that he's given Rodova a fighting chance, Derek nodded, still breathless. It's 4-4 now. The entire interstellar circuits, down to the final match. And somehow, despite being down 3-1 just a few rounds ago, Rodova is still in this. But don't let that scoreline fool you, Lee cut in, his voice sharpening. Geneva still holds the advantage. Leo's exhausted, and his body has taken a beating. He's bleeding from his shoulder and waist, and has already expended a lot of stamina to bring down 3 Grandmaster level opponents. I don't think he's got much left in the tank. And now he has to fight Darnell Nuna, Derek added quietly. A fresh Grandmaster. One who hasn't lifted a finger all day and one whose record within the circuits has never seen a loss. There's no way he wins this, Lee said, shaking his head, but there was no mockery in his tone. Only gravity. Logically, there's no path. Not against an unscathed Darnell. Ramos was already injured when he fought, but Darnell's coming in with full reserves. A pause. And then Derek added. But logic hasn't exactly been Leo Skyshard's strongest trait, has it? No, Lee agreed slowly. But miracles aren't sustainable, Derek. And he's already used 2. Another pause passed, heavier this time, before Derek leaned forward slightly, voice softer. Then I guess the only question now is, does he have one more left in him? The question of whether Leo had one more miracle left in him wasn't something the commentators wondered alone, as every spectator in the stands and back at home found themselves clutching to the same uncertainty, unable to look away. For the longest time, the Sky God Arena had been a thunderstorm of Geneva dominance, loud, rowdy, confident. But now it was silent, not because they didn't believe in Darnell, but because they had just watched the impossible happen. They had watched a bloodied first year with daggers and discipline carve through 3 seasoned Grandmasters without a single ounce of hesitation. And while logic still screamed that the final bout should be a formality, their hearts hesitated to agree. In the Rodova section, fans who had once slouched low in their seats now stood tall, hands over mouths, fists trembling on railings, eyes wide with unspoken hope. Some had tears in their eyes. Others whispered prayers. Come on, Leo, just one more. You can do this, boy. Please bring us glory after 22 long years. I'll personally buy every product you endorse if you win this one for us. But please 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 stand strong. All eyes were glued on Leo, as the circuit's viewership climbed to its absolute peak of 864 people watching live. This was a new record, as the circuits had never been this interesting in a while, as people universally were glued to the screens, waiting for Leo to pull off a miracle. Even the dignitaries seated in the VVIP balconies had their gazes sharpened, watching not just the scoreboard, but the boy who had tilted the entire bracket back from the brink of defeat. The boy who did not have the surname of the 6 great clans attached to him, but still put any fighter from the 6 great clans to shame. As curiosity about such a man and his past increased amongst the elite. Finally, it was Leo's injured teammates, and instructors watching from the stands, who prayed for him to do well, as all their hopes and aspirations now rested on his shoulders. Yu Shen, lying still on the infirmary cot, refused to look away from the screen. You're out there holding the line for all of us, and I couldn't even get past the opening round. If we win this, it won't be because of me. It'll be in spite of me. So please, finish what I couldn't. So that all of us can hold our heads high. Su Yang sat upright for the first time since regaining consciousness, still pale, still injured, but with both palms pressed tightly together in front of him. The fuck Skyshard? Why do you look so tired? I haven't woken up from near death just to see you fall here. Come on, dig deep and give them hell. I know you can. Enzo, wrapped in bandages and lying crooked on the bench, let out a tired chuckle. Hey, look at the crowd, he muttered. Geneva's fans are dead silent. I'm sure they didn't think one skinny bastard with daggers could shake him this bad. Principal Ulrich stood with arms folded high above in the Rodova box, watching Leo stand strong with a visible glee on his face. Just one more win, and no one will ever question why I placed my faith in a couple new kids over the many. I saw it the day he walked in. That it would come down to him, and Su Yang. And I was right. In the end it's only those boys who scored points for Rodova. Instructor Hen leaned forward from the Rodova section, one hand resting on the railing, his knuckles white. All those nights I stayed late training you, all those hours we spent sparring until your knees gave out, I just hope it was enough to last you through the final round. And even Professor David, seated silently in the shadows of the faculty tier, sipped his tea without expression. If you pull this off for Rodova, maybe, just maybe, I'll go easy on you for the academic finals. Leo. Leo. Clap. 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 Leo. Leo. The Rodova fans sang in rhythm, as Leo stood unfazed in the center of the arena. Across from him stood Darnell Nuna, the son of the Black Serpents Guild Master Dupravel Nuna, and the opponent that he wanted to face the least in this tournament. Up till now, he hadn't made up his mind on whether or not he wanted to fight Darnell Nuna seriously. However, at this moment, amongst the cheers of this crowd, he finally came to the conclusion that he would fight against Darnell with his all. If the consequence of him defeating the Black Serpent Guild Master's son was him being denied entry into the guild, then be it. However, after witnessing how Su Yang and Enzo had pushed themselves to the brink just for Rodova's sake, he couldn't bring himself to throw away the finals anymore, as he decided to give the next fight his all. Sky God Arena, Finals Match 8. Darnell stood across Leo with his signature childishness plastered all over his face, as let alone trying to intimidate Leo, he did not even try to hide his amazement. Sir Leo, you're definitely an amazing fighter. You almost turned me into a fanboy. I'm for sure buying your action figure after the finals are over, Darnell said, as Leo raised an eyebrow in surprise. Smack talk before a big fight he could handle. Because smack talk he expected. However, such niceties before such a tense final wasn't something he could expect. And somehow, it repulsed him even more than the worst insult. "Aw, shut your mouth or I'll shove that action figure right up your ass," Leo thought internally, however, did not let any of his irritation reflect on his face, as he assumed his signature low fighting stance. "Ha ha. No words exchanged. You're as cold as my father." No wonder you're an assassin by choice. Ha ha ha, Darnell said, assuming his own fighting stance, as the referee nervously glanced between the two. Fighters ready? He asked, looking at Darnell first and then Leo, as both nodded. Very well then. Begin, he said, dropping his hand, as both fighters charged towards one another at the same time. With the crowd gasping collectively before the first exchange. However, while every single eye in the stands was either focused on the fight or the Jumbotron, there was only one man in the entire arena who was focused on neither. This man was Ruyan Baxamore, the Seven Lions Guildmaster, and an evil cult elder in disguise, as he focused on the viewership numbers displayed on his data slate instead. It was a good judgment call to not blow the arena up during the opening match. The viewership dipped from 650B to 570 when Yu Shen lost. However, it somehow climbed to nearly 900 billion now. Ruyan thought, as he smiled happily looking at the climbing viewership numbers. Dozens of my cult brothers and sisters will lose their life today once I press this button. And for that I'm truly sorry, but it's a sacrifice that we must make. We must remind the Righteous Alliance that we haven't forgotten the death of our previous dragon. That this bitter war isn't quite over yet. And for that, this terrorist attack is necessary. Ruyan thought, as he felt his chest tighten up at the thought of just how many peak masters were about to lose their life in this mission today. In total, the cult had managed to integrate 51 undercover security officials inside the arena, 31 of whom were transcendent-level warriors and irreplaceable assets to their cause. But now that the mission had entered its active phase, all 51 of them, including him, were as good as dead. Even if they succeeded in abducting Darnell Nuna, there was no scenario in which the Righteous Alliance allowed any of them to walk away alive once the operation began, and hence Ruyan's heart felt heavy as he wept for their impending demise. Dupravel, you bastard, I'll be watching from the afterlife as you scream and writhe, begging for your son's return, Ruyan thought, his gaze drifting toward the VIP balcony where Dupravel stood, as his killing intent flared, just for a moment. And Dupravel noticed instantly. As the Black Serpent's Guildmaster turned slightly to meet Ruyan's gaze, before chuckling visibly. Dupravel had known for years that Ruyan hated him in a professional capacity, and hence he found nothing odd about his killing intent. However, little did Dupravel know that this time it wasn't because Ruyan was pissed by his presence, but because he genuinely wanted to kill him. Him, the Su family patriarch. The Mu family patriarch and the Enigma Wade are the strongest fighters in attendance for the finals, and they are the ones we must stall for the kidnapping to go successfully, Ruyan thought, as he hoped that everything would go as planned when he hit the button soon. 900 billion and 663 million watching, I think this is enough. Ruyan decided, as he glanced down at the arena, where Leo and Darnell were exchanging fast-paced attacks, before bringing out the activation remote. Oh God Soren, please watch over us as we carry out this heroic act under your name. Ruyan prayed, before pressing the activation button, as all evil cult members within the Sky God Dome got a 30 seconds activation signal, which was a small electric current across their wrists from a common device they all wore, which signaled that only 30 seconds remained until the explosion, so that they could all synchronize their future movements. Oof, what a close dodge by Skyshard. He's beginning to really play it close to the chest now, as his dodges have grown riskier and riskier, Derek said, as he watched the finals match play out from the edge of his seat. It's the fatigue kicking in Derek. Nothing else. This is the fourth match he's fighting in the day, and his legs are not as fast as his first. He's playing it close because he has no other option, Lee added, as Leo dodged yet another attack by Darnell at the last possible microsecond, his close-quarter dodging causing the Rodova fans to shriek and squirm in panic. Skyshard's unique blocking ability is what's keeping him alive in this bout so far, as when he can't dodge, he simply activates that unique barrier move to deflect Darnell's attack. However, for how long can he keep that up? A barrier of that strength is sure to be draining on one's mana reserves, and considering how he's an assassin and not a mage, I don't think he's got much left to spare anymore, Derek theorized, as Leo blocked yet another attack using Celestial Veil with him looking utterly on the back foot so far in the bout. Well, we have seen it again and again. Leo's Skyshard on the back foot for the entire match, until he isn't. So maybe he's just waiting for the right moment to counter, or pull out yet another unseen move from his bag. You never know with this one, Lee said, as the camera angle cut to Leo's smiling face, as he activated 1,000 Phantom Slashes. Sky God Arena, Finals Match 8. In the final battle, Leo found himself in the same position that Ramos had stood in not long ago, where he was cornered, drained, and hunted by his opponent. Except this time, he wasn't the one pressing down with lethal intent, but rather the one being chased. He behaves like a naive child, but his battle instincts are the real deal, his speed and reflexes are no joke. I can barely keep up with this tired body of mine, Leo acknowledged, as he barely dodged a slash that went over his head. The longer this fight goes, the worse my odds of victory become, he admitted internally, his chest rising unevenly as he adjusted the grip on his daggers, the weight of exhaustion pulling at his limbs. Due to faster recovery, the waist wound he had received in the previous battle had dulled but not disappeared, as each twist of the torso reminded him it was still there. His shoulder throbbed beneath the dried layer of blood and his field of vision fluttered at the edges like a light bulb about to burn out. He had burned through most of his body's natural mana reserves and he was now drawing energy from his new improved cells, however, even they could only sustain his movement for so long. He needed a finish, an end to this fight. And fast. But charging in without having a handle on the opponent's abilities, without knowing Darnell's range, tempo, or reaction delay, was akin to suicides, which was why Leo decided to gauge his abilities first before betting it all on one final sequence. Swish, clang, whoosh, asterisk. He watched, as Darnell's short sword sang through the air, the arcs deceptively graceful, wide swings giving way to sharp jabs, all accompanied by that annoyingly innocent grin stitched across his lips. Whoa, that almost got you, didn't it? He giggled mid-strike, like a boy trying out a new toy, but Leo didn't respond. He remained focused and intense, his mind calculating the precise arc of Darnell's attacks using absolute vision while his eyes processed the twitch of his muscles and predicted his next move. Swoosh. Leo tilted, slid, rolled, pivoted, never letting Darnell's blade touch skin, but never retreating far enough to reset either, as he pushed his body to the limit of its reflexes. Every dodge was calculated, not to preserve distance, but to inch closer to an answer, as he gauged Darnell's abilities in the most daring way possible. He read the pivot delays in Darnell's footwork, tracked how long it took him to shift from a low sweep into a high feint, measured the two-step recovery he needed after committing to a lunge. And then came the one that nearly caught him. A tight inward step, a low to high transition meant to bait a jump, a deceptive shoulder drop to sell the feint, and a real thrust aimed straight for the ribs. It was a move called Serpent's Bite, and it was a combo Leo had never seen before, as he fell for the deception for a split second, before realizing his mistake and correcting his trajectory. However, it was too late to dodge by then, leaving Leo with only one option, which was to activate Celestial Veil. Clang. Asterisk. Mana surged in a shimmer of light, translucent, radiant, and impenetrable, as Darnell's blade crashed into it with enough force to rattle the stands. Dust kicked up. The crowd gasped. And inside the haze, Leo crouched, breathing hard but eyes sharp, as he came to the conclusion he had been waiting for. So that's your strength's limit. That's your maximum reach and that's the best move you've got, he concluded, as he finally got the information he needed to go for the counter-attack. I don't have enough mana to do this twice. So this has to work by hook or by crook, Leo thought, as he knew he did not have much left, but hopefully he wouldn't need much either. As he activated parallel processing and the world slowed down, he could see everything more clearly now. The slow rise and fall of Darnell's chest as he breathed. The movement of his feet as he charged in for a follow-up strike. And the gleam in his eyes as he waited for Leo to spin into a dodge. Every tremor of Darnell's muscle, every shift in his heel weight, every inch of his exposed flank, became clear to Leo now, as he activated 1,000 phantom slashes and pushed his speed to the maximum. To the crowd, he became a blur, someone so fast that they couldn't even follow his movements at all. And to Darnell, he became a nightmare, as dozens of phantom Leos burst toward him, some slashing high, others low, others striking from impossible angles in succession. His brain could barely register one before the next one came, and although he spun to defend the first strike which he felt was coming from the right, it actually came from the left, and with such power at that it simply blew his blade out of his hands. Clank! Asterisk. The short sword clattered to the ground. And in that moment, the real Leo stepped forward, one hand steady as it bent Darnell's right wrist, while the other was pressed to his neck, as he drew a single line of blood. "It's over, I win," Leo whispered in his ears, his voice exhausted, as Darnell froze in shock. "No way. I didn't even see you move," Darnell spoke in shock, as he couldn't even register when or how he found himself in this state. As Leo was just that fast towards the end. "Let him go. It's over," the referee said, jogging over to the duo, as Leo pulled his blade away and smiled, while the crowd burst to its feet. It was done. Leo had won. He had somehow achieved the impossible. However, just as the referee came up beside him, and was about to raise his hand as the victor, something unthinkable happened. "Winner," the referee began, reaching towards Leo's palm, when suddenly, boom! Asterisk. The ground split open, and everything went to hell. Sky God Arena, Leo's POV. Boom! Asterisk. A massive explosion shook the ground below Leo's feet as he stumbled off balance, his daggers instinctively raised in confusion. What's going on? He wondered, but before the thought could even complete, the very arena beneath him split open with a terrible mechanical groan, and his entire body lurched downward into the abyss. He was free falling. The ground beneath had collapsed, or rather, had been completely destroyed, as he dropped through the cracked floor like a helpless stone, the surface level of the arena vanishing above him, as he fell deeper and deeper with every passing second. A blast! And here, Leo's thoughts spun with confusion as the wind howled around him, his hair flailing and his limbs whipping in the fall. The Sky God Arena was the last place he would have expected something to go wrong. After all, this wasn't just any battlefield, it was the most protected arena in the universe, with billions across the universe watching live and with some of the most influential warriors of the universe in attendance. With such a setup, one expected it to be a safe place, but apparently it wasn't, as the blasts that took off the floor were proof of the lapse in security. Damn it, why does this fall feel endless? Leo wondered after a couple seconds, as his fall momentum continued to build up. The Sky God Arena was known for its modular floors, and the ability to swap battlefields that it stored beneath the surface. However, because of this feature, the construction of the arena was layered across several levels of levitation technology, each floor supported by anti-grav stabilizers and retractable suspension cores. And yet, now, they were gone. Blown to pieces, with nothing to break his fall to the absolute bottom anymore. Well fuck, Leo thought, as his sharp eyes scanned his surroundings. And to his relief, he wasn't in this alone, at least, as to his right, Darnell was falling too, his limbs flailing, his eyes wide in disbelief, as that ever-present childish smile seemed to now be replaced by raw, primal terror. All right, finally a reality check for the kid, Leo thought, before looking left, where the referee was tumbling alongside him too, with blood splattering from a gash across his shoulder, which he likely received by being caught in the initial blast radius. Then finally, as Leo twisted and looked underneath, he saw a yawning chasm of steel and exposed machinery, along with faint glimmers of light far, far below. Pieces of shattered arena tiles spun in the air. Charred fragments of support pillars, cables, pipes, all spiraling downward like deadly debris. Oh, there's the bottom, Leo thought, as he spotted the end, as he twisted midair and angled himself into a controlled fall, just in time to slam shoulder first into a metal platform below, as he cursed his luck for not having enough mana to cast one last celestial veil. Crash! Asterisk. Crack! Pain exploded through his back as he rolled across the surface, tumbling twice before crashing into a wall of support mesh, the wind knocked clean from his lungs. His shoulder screamed in protest, and blood trickled anew from his reopened wounds. His vision shook, but he endured. Above him, smaller pieces of debris that were slower than him to fall now finally hit the surface like pelting hail, and the air above seemed to be sealed by a golden barrier that vibrated with powerful energy. A golden dome of light formed over the crater he was in, sealing it shut, as several dozen warriors landed on it just a split second later, with one of them being Nian Fei, who immediately started punching and slashing at it, but to no avail. She looks desperate to break the containment spell. But why? Leo wondered, looking at the frantic expression on Nian Fei's face. However, he could not understand the reason behind it. He had never seen such panic in Fei's eyes before. She was always composed, always cold, but now she seemed desperate, and that made Leo feel scared too. Step, step, step. At that point, Leo sensed the presence of 3 hooded warriors around him, as the uneasy sensation he felt in his chest rose tenfold. Survive, his instincts seemed to scream, as he perceived a threat to his life. However, his depleted and bruised body was in no state to even stand up properly, much less muster a proper fight. Something's not right here. I can definitely feel a thick killing intent on my back, he concluded, as he searched frantically for the daggers he dropped after falling, however, unfortunately couldn't find them under the dust and debris of his surroundings. Meanwhile, above ground, chaos erupted like a chain reaction. Before anyone could react, before screams even had time to echo, the VVIP balconies were hit. 3 warriors clad in arena security uniforms who had been standing patiently on guard outside Dupravel's room, suddenly barged in with blades glowing as they charged towards Dupravel with a reckless abandon. They were evil cult operatives and their mission was to stall Dupravel Nuna, even if they had to sacrifice their life for it. And that's exactly what they did. They prevented Dupravel from jumping after his son momentarily, and stalled him long enough for the barrier to take hold, as they fought against him in a high-paced action sequence. The guildmaster of the Black Serpents had just turned from the railing when an obsidian blade shot toward his throat. However, with blinding speed, he raised his arm, catching the blade on a forearm guard, before dispatching the transcendent warriors that lunged towards him with a single palm strike to the forehead that made his head explode like it were a ball. Boom! Don't let him move. Stall as much as you can, the other 2 warriors said, as they unleashed their strongest attacks, and a brutal battle unfolded within the VVIP balcony, the clash sending shockwaves and aftershocks sideways, injuring many in the audience nearby. Elsewhere, the Mu clan patriarch fought off 3 attackers alone, his sword sweeping in golden arcs as security officials scrambled to his aid. Everywhere one looked there was only chaos. People screaming, bolts of energy being exchanged. Blood sprayed across the marble tiles as cult warriors began targeting select individuals in the crowd, names they had marked, faces memorized before the operation began, as they massacred key political, financial and influential figures in front of a massive live audience. Kill the guards. The guards have turned on us, someone said, as because of a handful of guards who committed misdeeds and betrayed the righteous alliance, all guards suffered the consequences, as members of the audience began to turn on them. Regardless of their affiliation, all warriors in guard uniforms were targeted by the righteous alliance members in the confusion, which only made the chaos worse, as the guards retaliated under self-defense, making their situation seem even worse to an angry mob. However, while the fights happening on the surface were bad, what the billions universe-wide were watching live was a cracked feed of Leo, Darnell and the referee scrambling to their feet, while unknown masked assailants surrounded them, in what had to be undoubtedly one of the most haunting live feeds in sports history. Nian Fei's POV. Fei watched Leo win the circuits from the upper faculty stands, from a vantage point that offered not only a flawless view of the battlefield, but also placed her within immediate reach of Leo should something go wrong. From where she stood, she could still see the dust curling from his final step, the tension in his stance, and the faint tremble in the referee's fingers as he reached for Leo's arm, as she smiled ear to ear watching him win. "I can't believe you really did it," she thought, arms folded tightly across her chest as she tried to steady the storm of emotions rising within her. She felt pride, immense, immeasurable pride, for what Leo had just accomplished. He had defied logic, crushed expectation, and shut up all naysayers with his performance today. As in only a single day, he had defeated 4 Grandmasters consecutively and carved his legend into the halls of the Sky God Arena. But even as her chest swelled with admiration, a heavier feeling pressed down on her ribs. As deep down she knew that something wasn't right. A tightening in her gut. A prickling at the back of her neck. An instinctive dread that refused to be reasoned with. She had known for weeks now that the cult was planning something at the circuits, something catastrophic. She'd been warned by the Elder, entrusted with Leo's protection the moment things went south. And yet, when the explosion finally happened, when the floor of the arena tore open and swallowed Leo whole into a pit of fire and ruin, she was still a step too slow. "Leo!" she screamed, the name tearing out of her throat as she hurled herself forward without a second thought, heart racing and panic flooding her system like venom. Yet she was too late. As by the time her boots touched down near the crater's edge, an unknown golden barrier had already sealed the area below, separating her from the boy she was entrusted to protect. Boom! She slammed into the barrier mid-stride, palms flattening against the shimmering wall of mana that pulsed with high-tier enchantments that were impossible for her to break down at her level. "No!" she hissed, eyes wide, heart pounding, as she instantly flared her mana and drew her blade, carving into the barrier with a precision strike, only to watch the barrier absorb the energy without so much as a flicker. Yet, she struck again. And again. And again. Each swing more frantic than the last, as her panic grew louder in her chest. "I must get to him. I must protect him," she thought, as she pressed her face closer to the glowing seal, desperate to try and peer through the layers of dust and light that separated her from the pit below, and what she saw made her stomach roll, as helplessness filled her body. I can sense 3 unknown signatures down there with him," she realized, her senses extending past the veil-like trembling fingers into a storm. Cult operatives. She didn't even need confirmation. As she could feel their murderous intent directed towards the 3 helpless individuals sprawled in the pit floor below. By Soren, they're going to kill him. No, worse, they're gonna murder him live, Faye thought, as her heart beat wildly, when she saw a cult operative pick up a dented camera, meant to stream the circuit matches live. And for a terrifying moment, her breath caught, because a thought far darker than panic clawed its way up her spine. Will the next dragon be devoured by its own cult? She looked left and Major Hen had landed beside her, furiously channeling strikes into the same barrier. 2 Geneva professors joined seconds later, followed by a dozen more fighters who all converged on the barrier now. However, despite their combined efforts, nothing seemed to work. The barrier was too strong. It was made from ancient enchantments that gave it power akin to a demigod-level spell, and none of them had the strength to break it. Come on, Faye growled, slamming her forehead to the barrier, her hairline bloodied now from the strain, as her voice broke under the weight of helplessness. I was supposed to protect him, she thought, as she kept watching the scene unfold below her with growing helplessness. Splat. The poor referee was the first to be murdered live, as he was decapitated without mercy, without even having a chance to fight back or say a few last words. No, stay off him. Stay off our dragon, Faye thought, as she saw one of them turn towards Leo next. However, thankfully, Darnell stood up and attacked them at that moment, distracting them from Leo momentarily. Unlike Leo, Darnell wasn't as injured or tired from the circuits, and hence once he regained his footing, he charged forward without hesitation, his mana surging as he sprinted straight at the closest cult operative with fury burning in his eyes. Get away from him, he shouted, throwing himself into the clash with reckless abandon, his body still trembling from the earlier battle, but his will undeterred. However, his opponent didn't even shift. The man he was charging at, a masked warrior cloaked in black, wasn't a grandmaster like the ones Darnell had trained to fight all his life, but rather a transcendent-level warrior, who was in an entirely different league of his own. And unfortunately, Darnell realized that the moment their bodies collided, as crack, asterisk. The cultist caught his punch midair and twisted his arm with such absolute precision, that his right arm snapped at the elbow joint like it was made of paper. Arghhhhhh. Darnell screamed, as his knees buckled, but he didn't fall. Instead, he clenched his teeth and lunged with his left, mana pouring through the only working limb he had. Only for the same result to be repeated. Crack, asterisk. His left arm followed the same fate as his right, being snapped off clean but in the opposite direction, as he gasped in pain, but no scream came this time. Only a faint sound escaped his lips as the cultist's elbow drove directly into his ribcage with a dull thud that sent shockwaves through his spine. And that was it. His body gave out, his limbs dangled uselessly, as the cultist casually slung him over his shoulder like he were but a broken puppet. Then, boom, asterisk. The golden barrier suddenly trembled under the weight of a colossal strike. As Dupraval Nuna finally arrived, his body landed like a meteor atop the golden barrier, the sheer pressure of his descent shattering the surrounding platforms. The moment his feet touched down, he raised both arms and unleashed a roaring domain strike, his voice trembling with wrath. "Leave my son alone, you filthy evil cult bastards." And immediately the sky cracked and the barrier dented. The golden dome shuddered beneath his power, glowing with fault lines of mana that webbed outward like breaking glass, but unfortunately for him, the barrier still did not shatter. "He's breaking through. We don't have time, go, now." The cultists shouted, their voices sharp with urgency as Dupraval's power cracked down from above like divine thunder. Without hesitation, one of them opened a teleportation portal midair, the space around it warping violently, before stepping through with Darnell slung over his shoulder. "The cult will forever remember your sacrifice, Brother Jishin," the second operative said solemnly, giving a brief nod to the cameraman before stepping into the portal himself. And then, only one remained. The man they called Jishin. The cameraman. He let the portal close with a flick of his wrist, sealing off their escape, as silence returned to the pit. For a moment, he simply stood there, still, composed, before slowly turning toward Leo, the camera still clutched in one hand while the other drifted to the hilt of the dagger at his waist. His steps were unhurried, almost casual, but there was a finality to the way he moved, like a man walking toward the end of a song, or the end of a life, his presence devoid of flair, yet heavy enough to make the air itself feel thicker. And when his eyes finally locked onto Leo's, hidden though they were behind that blank black mask, Leo felt the killing intent hit him like a crashing wave. Cold, deliberate, absolute. The man wasn't here to buy time. He was here to finish what the others couldn't. And he had chosen Leo as his final offering. Sky God Arena, Leo's POV. The moment the portal shimmered shut, sealing the last of the cultists' escape, Leo felt the weight of the silence settle across the crater like a veil. It wasn't the kind of silence that invited relief or calm, but the kind that marked the arrival of something inescapable, like a guillotine finally descending after an eternity of waiting. And as he stood there, barely upright, the burn in his ribs felt like a constant scream that refused to fade, his left shoulder seizing with every breath he took, as blood slid down the side of his arm and dripped quietly onto the dust below. Yet through it all, despite the broken state of his body, his mind remained strangely clear, as if detached from the pain entirely. Monarch's indifference had started to work overtime to stabilize his emotions. And with it came not peace, but sharpness, as every thought, every calculation, every possibility for survival now laid bare in front of him with brutal honesty, as the truth carved itself into his head like scripture. "I don't have much mana left, my ribs are cracked, my shoulder is dislocated, there's no weapon within reach, no escape route, no reinforcements, just me, a shattered mess of flesh and bone, facing a transcendent-level killer whose entire purpose in this moment is to end my life while the universe watches." And yet even knowing all of that, he didn't panic. Because panic was a luxury he couldn't afford anymore. What he needed now was time, as his only shot at survival was through external intervention, and the only thing he had left to buy it with was his breath and his tongue. The only shot I have left to survive is to stall. And the only tool I have left to do it with, is my voice. Leo calculated, as he began thinking about what were the best words to trigger his opponent and bait a response. Should I beg for him to spare me? Should I mock him for attacking a kid? Leo wondered, as swallowing the copper taste of blood in his mouth, he kept his eyes locked on the cloaked figure ahead, who moved towards him calmly with a camera cradled loosely in one hand, and a dagger in another. However, while he thought of many opening lines to speak, eventually he settled on the most cliché one, as he asked, "Why are you doing this?" Leo asked this, not as a plea, not as some naive cry for mercy, but as a question that he needed the man to answer, if only to educate the billions watching this live. "I'm not from a powerful clan, I have no legacy to threaten you with, I'm a nobody, born and raised in obscurity, so why me? Why kill me?" There was a pause. Then, amusement. A dry chuckle escaped from behind the masked man's lips, as he tilted his head upward, just slightly, toward the shimmering barrier where Dupravel Nuna and the other top brass continued to rain down blows, to no avail. And then slowly, he looked back towards Leo. "You know," he said, his voice soaked in sarcasm, layered with something darker than simple humor. "The way the universe paints us, the so-called cult of ascension, we're always labeled as the villains, aren't we? The madmen in cloaks. The zealots with no cause. Butcherers. Maniacs." He took a step forward, not fast, not sudden, but measured, deliberate, as his pitch rose. "But we are not that," he continued, as the camera's red light blinked, still rolling, still capturing every second for the universe to see. "I don't take pleasure in killing a mere grandmaster. Especially not one who's already at the edge of passing out. Especially not one who, truth be told, earned my respect with his fighting today. Another step. But I must kill you, because killing you means something. Another step. Closer now. Unfair, isn't it?" he asked, his tone turning somber, almost reflective. "You, who've done nothing to us. You, who never once raised your blades against our cause. You, who might never have crossed paths with us at all." He stopped then, eyes fixed on Leo, voice dropping like a blade. "But then again, Noah Stormwind never hurt the Righteous Alliance either." The name struck harder than any weapon could. "Our dragon. Our future. Our hope." He said it with reverence, with pain buried beneath steel, and in that moment, Leo saw it, the raw hatred within the man that didn't need faking. Noah was the kindest soul I've ever known. He didn't care for power, didn't care for conquest, only for guiding our people, for protecting those who had no voice. And for that, he was hunted, betrayed, assassinated. The man's gaze flicked upward once more, toward the man still hammering uselessly against the barrier, Dupravel Nuna. That snake up there slit his throat. Not because Noah was evil. Not because he was a threat. But because Noah was loved. "And now, you," Jishin said, turning back, his tone hardening, the bitterness in his chest surfacing like a tide. "You, who captivated the galaxy today. You, who rallied the hopeless and dragged your team from the depths of defeat. You, who now carry the same weight of admiration Noah once did," he said, approaching, as he reached an arm's length away. "I must kill you today to pass on the same pain that we once felt to those watching at the Righteous Alliance, so that they dare not think about coming after our talents in the future." Leo's eyes widened in panic as he heard those words, as he tried to shift his stance and balance his weight, preparing a makeshift fighting stance. However, it was utterly useless. With his left shoulder rendered useless, he couldn't even put up a proper guard, while his injured waist and damaged spine made it hard for him to squat. To make matters even worse, he moved too clumsily to put any real distance between them when retreating backwards, nor did he have the stamina left to dodge and weave, when he saw Jishin sending a punch his way, as bam! Coup! With just a single brutal punch to the gut, Jishin drove the air from his lungs in a burst of pain so violent it shattered what little balance he had left. Thud! He buckled. His knees gave in as he dropped, fingers instinctively clutching at the black robes in front of him, knuckles pale against fabric, as his head slumped powerlessly against Jishin's thigh. The universe watched, as the same champion that helped Rodova come back from a 3-1 low to a 5-4 win, now hung helplessly onto a terrorist's robes, waiting for judgment to befall him, as Jishin pointed his weapon towards him with a slow and steady hand. So say goodbye to the universe, Leo Skyshard, for I'm about to immortalize you forever, Jishin said softly, almost tenderly, as the scene locked into place. With blood on his lips and defeat pressed into his spine, Leo Skyshard knelt beneath the cold gaze of the lens, offered not as a warrior in battle, but as a sacrifice meant to echo through the annals of history. Leo's breath stuttered in and out, blood pooling thick behind his teeth, as the world seemed to blur at the edges, tilting in and out of focus like a camera struggling to hold on. His knees dug into the dirt. His body trembled under its own weight. His fingers clutched the hem of his enemy's robes, not as a warrior bracing for his next attack, but as a beaten, ruined thing barely clinging to consciousness. Or at least, that was how it looked. And that, Leo thought, was the whole point. Because while his body was indeed broken, and his lungs did scream for air with every breath, his mind, his most dangerous weapon, had never been sharper. Monarch's indifference dulled the pain and slowed his panic, letting him think with the same calm, calculated malice he had just used to win the circuit. And now, with a blade pressed to the back of his neck and the universe ready to mourn him, he calculated that the only way out of this mess for him was by using the one forbidden technique that he promised himself he would never use in a public setting. I don't know if this will work or not. I have no idea how painful this will be. I don't even know if it will make a transcendent warrior flinch, or will it just make me look stupid to even try. But it's my only way out, Leo thought, his vision narrowing as he subtly adjusted the angle of his fingers. The move he was planning to use was one he had learned a few months ago while receiving a genetic awakening shot. It was a perverted move that wasn't designed to kill, wasn't designed to maim, but was rather designed to commit unspeakable atrocities on both men and women. However, while it was effective on both genders, for men especially, it was designed to humiliate. To incapacitate. To destroy a man's will to continue fighting in a single instant. A forbidden skill by most righteous martial code standards, named the Ball Buster. The move's name alone was enough to earn him mockery should he utter it out loud, so much so that he had never once used it in public. But now, that embarrassment, that shame, it didn't matter. Because, being embarrassed was still better than being dead. Shuffle. Leo shuffled his grip on the enemy, his arms now holding his robes near his inner thigh, as he looked up, trying to look like a pathetic helpless mess. Do you know what hurts a man more than being killed? He asked at this moment, blood sputtering out of his mouth as he spoke, as Jishin smiled evilly at his words. What? He asked, humoring one last word from Leo before killing him, as Leo closed his eyes and smiled, before opening them again as he looked into the camera and said, I'll show you what. Before activating the move Ball Buster. Dash 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 dash. Leo's arms moved with what little speed left in them, as thankfully he was too close to the opponent for him to react in time to his intentions. His fingers, once trembling on Jishin's robe, suddenly turned steely and sharp as they slid up the inner fold of the warrior's cloak, his thumb hooking the fabric open just enough for his right hand to snake in like a viper. As the contact was immediate, his palm flattened against the groin of his opponent, centered perfectly over the sack, through the thin layer of robe, and for a moment, everything slowed. Time, breath, motion, and then, Leo's mana surged. Not as a slash, not as a blast, but a focused, invasive flow, channeled directly through the core of his palm like a piercing wave, as he pumped volatile mana into the densely packed nerve clusters of Jishin's testicles, embedding it deeper than any physical strike could reach. The sensation was vile. Even for Leo, who was not fazed by any amounts of blood or splattered brains, this still felt filthy. The mana felt wrong in his veins, like pushing raw current into something sacred. He could feel the delicate tissue throb beneath his palm, the capillaries fluttering like terrified insects as they resisted the invasive energy. However, they were helpless against him, as before even Jishin realized something was wrong, Leo clenched his fingers, as boom. There wasn't a sound heard in the air, but there was a reaction that Jishin surely felt straight in his soul. As from the inside, Leo's mana swelled like an expanding balloon, and burst everything that was most precious to a man. Capillaries ruptured in dozens. Veins snapped. Tissue imploded under the pressure, as Leo's mana dispersed like shrapnel through one of the most sensitive clusters of nerve endings on the male body. And the result was instant. Jishin didn't scream, no, instead, his body underwent a seizure. Back arched. Eyes widened. A choking gasp escaped his mouth as his legs buckled, his entire frame spasming violently like he'd been electrocuted. His knees gave in before he could even register what had happened, as goo, G-A-A-A-A-A-A-H, Asterisk. He screamed violently, unlike anything Leo had ever heard from a grown man before. As there wasn't a note of pain in his voice, just pure devastation. A-I-I-I-I-I-I-O-O-O-O-O-O-O-O-O-O. A keening wail ripped from Jishin's throat, raw and ragged, as he collapsed backwards, rolling onto his side as he clutched at his ruined groin with both hands, his dagger dropping from his grip like an afterthought. What the fuck? His voice cracked mid-sentence. His legs kicked helplessly, his heels digging furrows into the dirt as he writhed like a man being pulled apart from the inside. His mask was still on. But Leo didn't need to see his face to know it was twisted in agony, because no amount of facial control could mask that kind of trauma. It was beyond torture. It was an emasculation incarnate. A blow not to the body, but to the soul. And for a brief second, Leo just stared, still on his knees, panting heavily, blood rolling down his chin, as he observed a transcendent-level warrior lose all concept of pride. It had worked. Somehow, grabbing a transcendent warrior by the balls had worked, and although everything happened too quickly for Leo to properly feel it, as he opened and closed his palms, he felt even his own body shudder involuntarily at his work. I think I completely atomized his balls to nothingness. If someone pushes the flimsy hanging skin back inside his body, I think I might have just created a new hole in his body, Leo realized, as he felt shivers run down his own spine. This was a fate he wouldn't even wish upon his worst enemy. And yet, it had been necessary for him to survive. I survived for now, but he's not going to stay down forever, Leo thought now, as his eyes fell upon the dagger that Jishin had just dropped a few feet away, lying uselessly in the dust. His eyes locked onto it like a dying man spotting water in a desert, as with his limbs still trembling, and his balance still uncertain, he crawled towards it with all the strength left in his body. Each motion felt like dragging a corpse. But he pushed forward regardless, one agonizing inch at a time. Because he knew, Jishin wouldn't stay down forever. And the next time he got up, there would be no second chance or wasted chit-chat. Knee and Faye's paw, a few seconds ago. As Faye watched Jishin draw his blade, her heart lurched into her throat, a silent scream lodging behind clenched teeth as her eyes fixated on the glint of metal that hovered just above Leo's neck. Her fist slammed the golden barrier harder in one final desperate effort born from instinct rather than logic, because logic had long since told her this wall could not be broken by anything she had. Not by her alone, at least. And yet, she still tried. Still carved her blade into the same groove she'd carved a dozen times before, as if persistence might defy the enchantment where strength could not. But it was too late. The blade was drawn. The angle had shifted. Jishin was ready to finish it. And she could do nothing but watch as the dragon she swore to protect was about to be executed. However then, Leo moved. A subtle shift of the wrist. A tightening of the shoulders. A strange closeness to Jishin's thigh that seemed deliberate. As Faye's eyes narrowed. What are you? And that's when it happened. The mana spike was small, almost negligible to anyone not paying close attention to the exchange. But she was. And she felt it. That sudden pulse of raw, invasive energy that Leo sent into Jishin's body, was a technique she had never seen before, and the results it produced were shocking to say the least. Goo, G-A-A-A-A-A-A-H, The scream that ripped from the cultist's throat wasn't pain, but rather the sound of a man discovering a kind of agony he didn't even know existed. Jishin reeled, collapsed, convulsed, while Leo, bloodied and broken, remained on his knees, panting through a crimson smile. And Faye could only stare, as half of her wanted to cry from relief, while the other half looked around in desperation, as she glanced towards the same Dupravel Nuna that her cult hated, hoping that he would crack the barrier soon, so she could dive down and save Leo. Thud, thud. At this moment, two other monarchs entered the fray, as the Mu family patriarch and the Enigma Wade also showed up. Both gave Dupravel a knowing nod, as the three stood in formation, seemingly ready to enhance each other's attacks and work together to break the barrier. Dupravel's aura surged first, as a violent torrent of black-violet energy burst around him in serpentine coils. Beside him, the Mu patriarch drew a long breath, and as he exhaled, golden runes spiraled from his chest and danced along his arms and onto the curved Talwar sword he held. And finally, Wade, ever silent, ever enigmatic, merely raised a single hand, and the space around his palm bent unnaturally, as if reality itself was preparing to give way. Then, boom! All three unleashed their might in a single coordinated strike. Dupravel moved like a beast unchained, his fists hammering down on the barrier in a flurry of precise, brutal blows that fractured the dome's outermost layers. The Mu patriarch followed with a divine cleave of his blade, a golden arc slicing through the fabric of the enchantment, carving deep into the structure's core. And finally Wade simply tapped the barrier with his index and middle finger. As the world went silent for half a second before a high-pitched crack echoed like shattering glass from within the enchantment itself. Within microseconds, factures webbed outward across the dome's surface, spreading like veins, glowing with unstable mana as the golden light began to flicker, until it shattered completely, as the barrier came undone. Crack! The barrier cracked, and hundreds of warriors fell into the pit all around Leo, while several dozen attacks landed on Jishin, who was turned to a pile of bones and ash within moments. Halt! Nobody moves, Dupravel commanded, as soon as he landed in the pit, his voice sounding grave, as he seemed desperate to do something, before the people standing in the pit ruined it. Extending his hand, he summoned something strange, an ancient silver urn, etched in glowing white runes, as it hovered before him, suspended in air by the sheer amount of mana he fed into it. It did not seem to appear from a spatial pouch, nor a spatial ring. No, this was not an object he carried, but rather an object he conjured from a sealed space known only to him, like a sacred relic bound to his soul. And then he began to chant. Low at first, so low that even Faye, standing a few feet away, couldn't hear it clearly, but the longer it went on, the more the universe seemed to respond, as the wind stilled and the temperature dropped, as if the urn was sucking the vitality of the universe itself. Xing GG. The urn trembled. Its lid cracked open slowly with a hiss of pressurized air that reeked of old blood and burnt incense, as the ashes that were once Jishin, bone fragments, slivers of tendon, even the last flakes of his scorched black robes, rose from the floor like dust caught in a reverse wind, drifting upward, before being drawn into the urn. Faye could only watch as every last speck of his body was collected by the artifact, devoured in silence, before the lid sealed itself shut with a deep, final clunk that echoed like a tombstone slamming into place. Only then, after the ritual was done and the artifact returned to stillness, did the wind start moving again, and the temperature return to normal, as Dupravel, covered in sweat from head to toe, let out a deep sigh. I can't sense the other two, the Enigma Wade said, his voice rough, worn, but filled with certainty. Not in this sector. Not even in this star system. He paused, his brows furrowing deeper as his expression turned grim. Whatever spatial rift the evil cult bastards used to escape, it wasn't a simple hop. They've covered a vast distance, and fast at that. His eyes turned slowly toward Dupravel now, and though his voice held no emotion, there was weight in his words. Apologies, Guildmaster, it seems the cult bastards have got your son. Wade said, as Dupravel didn't respond to him right away. He stood there, one hand still resting on the sealed urn as his chest rose and fell with the weight of mana fatigue. His eyes narrowed beneath the tangled strands of damp hair clinging to his forehead, not from fear or sorrow, but from pure, simmering calculation, like a man already dissecting the next 100 steps in his mind before the first words ever left his mouth. "Don't worry about it," he said in a voice that bore no hesitation or doubt, as he simply glanced down at the urn, and for a brief second, broke into a dark, cold smile. "I've got one of them now," he said, lifting the urn slightly with a twitch of his fingers, "and I have my ways to make the dead sing like canaries." His tone wasn't boastful. It wasn't theatrical. It was the flat, matter-of-fact promise of a man who had done this before, many times, and would do it again without blinking. "I'll find out everything," he continued, his voice low but heavy, each syllable landing with purpose. "Who ordered it? Who sanctioned it? Where they took my son? What they plan to do next? All of it." And then, slowly, his head tilted upward, past the ruined edge of the shattered arena, past the stunned warriors still trying to make sense of what they'd just seen, until his gaze locked on the beautiful blue sky above. "I'll find my son," he said again, softer this time, but no less terrifying. "And once I do." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Because the promise in his silence was louder than any vow he could have ever spoken. Me and Faye had expected a bit more drama, perhaps some crying, some shouting, or at the very least, a little public rage from Dupravel Nuna in the aftermath of his son's kidnapping. But to her mild disappointment, the Black Serpent's guildmaster kept his composure remarkably intact. Even if he was boiling on the inside, which she had no doubt he was, given every intelligence report painted him as a doting father who spoiled his son rotten, Dupravel did not crumble, did not shout, and most certainly did not break down. At least not here, not in front of everyone. Instead, he stood tall, face unreadable, expression carved from stone, still playing the part of a dignified monarch, even as the ashes of his enemies cooled at his feet. "TCH, guess you don't reach monarch status without learning to bury your emotions somewhere deep," Faye thought, exhaling lightly as she shook her head in disappointment, before letting her gaze drift to the one person she was actually worried about. Leo. Leo clutched Jishin's dagger like it was the last thread tethering him to consciousness, his fingers locked tight around the hilt as his breaths came in ragged, uneven pulls, each one sounding like it might be his last before passing out of exhaustion. "Leo, are you okay?" Faye asked, her voice softer than usual, gentle, almost maternal, as she quickly uncorked a healing potion and pressed the cool glass vial to his lips. Gulp. Leo drank greedily, the vibrant blue liquid sliding down his throat in heavy swallows. Warmth spread through his body almost instantly, rushing like a current through torn muscle and fractured bone, sealing micro-tears, soothing skin lesions, and igniting a burning sting deep in his dislocated shoulder as it began realigning on its own. "That was a valiant fight, kid, you did well to survive," came a calm, measured voice from nearby. Mu Jonlong, the Mu clan patriarch, approached with the quiet dignity of someone used to commanding rooms without raising his voice, as his gaze fell to Leo with a rare flicker of respect. "It's unfortunate," Jonlong continued, kneeling beside him and picking up the camera that was still live and rolling, "to see young talents like you being targeted by those cowards. The evil cult pretends to be righteous, but all they do is prey on the weak while dressing it up as justice." With a flick of his thumb, he shut the camera off, ending the universal broadcast abruptly. "You two, Rodova instructors. Get your boy to the medical bay. He's been through hell and needs proper care immediately." His tone was firm, not demanding but still absolute, like an order given out of concern and not authority. Faye and Major Hen exchanged a brief glance before nodding in sync, as without wasting another second, they each took one of Leo's arms, supporting his weight between them as they prepared for ascent. And with that, they leapt out of the pit, one level at a time, carrying the bloodied champion out of the crater, away from the battlefield, and toward the recovery he so desperately needed. However, as they made their way there, they all looked back at the incident that took place in a different light, with each focusing on a different aspect of what unfolded. Hen looked back at the incident with rage bubbling in his heart, as he completely bought into the narrative that the evil cult was the most despicable organization in the universe that needed to be eradicated at any and all costs. In his head, he thought about likely upcoming scenarios where the Righteous Alliance might put up a recruitment notice to prepare a war force against the evil cult, as he thought about leaving his teaching job and signing up for it, just to do his part in eradicating evil from this universe. However, contrary to him, Mi and Faye saw this event as something else entirely. From Faye's perspective, this attack was a grand success for the evil cult, with them succeeding in sowing fear and chaos into the universe and kidnapping Darnell Nuna. However, she also felt anxious for the fallout that was about to take place in the near future, and whether or not the cult was ready for it. Having successfully kidnapped Darnell Nuna put them in a war path against the Righteous Alliance, where sooner or later a massive conflict was sure to unfold. Finally, Leo's takeaway from the event was perhaps the most inward-facing of all, as he cared little for his own injuries, the cult's escape, or even the fact that his actions had been broadcast to every inhabited quadrant of the universe. Because all he could think about, all he could truly feel in this moment, was how monstrously powerful the monarchs who had stood above him were. Mu Jonlong, Dupraval Nuna, the Enigma Wade. He had fought valiantly today, spilled blood, broken bones, and clawed his way through 4 Grandmasters to claim victory for Rodova, and for a fleeting moment after he achieved it, he had felt invincible. But then they appeared, and everything he had accomplished felt small, insignificant. Their very presence warped the space around them, as their auras didn't simply exude power, they imposed it, like their existence itself bended the laws of reality. The pressure that Dupraval Nuna exuded when he said, "Stop, nobody moves," it made my blood chill as my body flinched and refused to obey my own head. What level of strength must he have? That I can't even disobey an indirect command of his that he spoke casually. Leo wondered, as he felt his heart sink in his chest. Today he realized that there existed a level of strength so far beyond his own that even 1,000 versions of himself wouldn't make up a fraction of their pressure, and it made him feel slightly depressed at how weak he was in the grand scheme of things. Leo had witnessed Wade say, "I can't sense them in this solar system," with the same calm he might use to comment on the weather, as if searching an entire star system for 2 people was as trivial as glancing around a room. Their attacks could split this asteroid in half if they wanted to. Maybe even the planet beneath it. And they're holding back, Leo thought, his lips tightening as he exhaled slowly, every throb of pain in his body now eclipsed by the weight of that realization. So this is the difference between those who command the universe and those who fight in it. This is what it means to be at the peak. And yet, despite the inadequacy curling in his gut, despite the humbling force of their existence crushing down on his pride, Leo didn't feel despair. He felt hunger. He felt resolve. Because today, he had witnessed the peak for the first time. Today, he had seen what it meant to be a monarch versus a monarch-level talent, as he realized just how far a distance he needed to travel before he could be proud of himself as a warrior. And although he wasn't quite there yet, Leo had confidence in himself that if he continued to survive, he would surely get there one day. Sky God Arena, a few minutes after the collapse. As Mi and Faye and Major Hen escorted Leo to the medical bay, they briefly glanced at the Sky God Arena stands, which looked almost as chaotic as the pit they just exited. The echoes of chaos that had started alongside the explosions had not yet fully faded, however the violence that had erupted along with it was beginning to finally settle down. This was the kind of quiet that followed only after enough blood had been spilled to silence even the loudest of voices, as everyone involved was too traumatized to make idle chatter. The scent of blood and charred flesh lingered in the air, layered over by the pungent smell of spilled innards, as the blood of the dead soaked into the cracks of the once pristine Sky God Arena tiles, with at least a few thousand seemingly having lost their life to the chaos. Of the guards assigned to the event, Most were dead, and those who weren't had either fled the arena perimeter in panic or were currently being held at blade point by frightened survivors who could no longer distinguish between protector and traitor. The guard's uniform that once meant safety, now meant suspicion, as most innocent guards seemed disgusted by the colors they wore. And with law and order in the arena having completely crumbled beneath the weight of panic, fear, and betrayal, it was eventually the Universal Army soldiers who restored control. Scattered throughout the stands, lobbies, and upper boxes, men and women of the army who had come to the venue as nothing more than spectators, cadets, and off-duty officers, recognized the failure of local law and order and voluntarily stepped up to fill the gap. They stepped forward not as envoys of any singular faction, but as soldiers bound by the unspoken code that when law crumbles and chaos reigns, it falls upon those forged in discipline to rise and restore order. A lieutenant from the 2nd Interstellar Fleet took charge of the South Gate, rallying survivors and redirecting foot traffic. A pair of seasoned border scouts coordinated medical retrieval units, organizing triage zones and flagging priority evacuees. A transport ship logistics captain seized a downed communication node and reactivated the long-range broadcast grid, issuing a universal distress alert and lockdown directive, as he ensured that all transport services in and out of the Sky God Arena were suspended within minutes. Air traffic lanes were sealed. Portal rings locked and suspensor trams along the asteroid's inner tunnels were put on lockdown. This facility is now under military lockdown. All civilians are to return to their designated lodgings immediately. Anyone in need of medical attention is to report to the central triage zones. For now, remain calm, remain still and cooperate with the Army, and I assure you that you will be assisted in a timely manner. The announcement echoed from commentary booth loudspeakers as the voice speaking through it sounded crisp, commanding, and left no room for argument. And remarkably, people listened. Because for the first time since the explosions had begun, someone was speaking with an authority that could not be faked, an authority born not from titles or uniform, but from steel nerves, clean orders, and battlefield experience. The arena grounds, once trembling with fear and violence, began to move like a machine rebuilding itself. Order, however fragile, began to take root. Telepathic mages helped calm those in hysterics, while non-lethal stun drones patrolled the upper stands, ensuring no further outbreaks of violence occurred. Within the hour, every civilian not marked as medically urgent was quietly escorted back to their lodgings under firm but measured military supervision, with all exits sealed and movement restricted as the entire complex shifted into lockdown. Interrogation units began working in silence, collecting witness testimonies without drawing attention, while senior warriors traced the arcs of magic still lingering in the air, scanning for residual mana signatures and reconstructing the sequences of battle that had unfolded within the arena's stands, to recognize the exact culprits. And through it all, Leo and the other injured members of the circuit's team remained guarded behind Major Hen, Professor David, Principal Ulrich and me and Faye, as the Rodova teachers ensured that their students got the best medical treatment possible, while also shielding them from pointless inquiry interviews. No low-level officials could pass into the Rodova recovery room to ask the children questions, as Ulrich chased them away with the sternest of rebukes. For now at least, it seemed like Leo could recover in peace, as the Rodova medical staff tried their best to restore his battered body to peak condition. Meanwhile Commander Jackson was one of the highest-ranking Universal Government official present in the arena when the explosions happened, and he was one of the few who had followed me and Faye into the pit, during the early stages of the explosion's aftermath. Since he was sitting right above the Rodova teacher's balcony during the circuits, he kept a close eye on Faye throughout tournament, and was quick to follow her into the pit, when she leapt in. And what he found out next, was not something unexpected. Faye seemed to bang on the golden barrier separating her from Leo like her life depended on it, as in that moment he saw the desperation of a mother trying to save her own child in Faye's eyes. They are definitely related by blood. No simple guard would become this desperate to save an asset, Jackson assessed at that moment, as he theorized that Faye and Leo were definitely related by blood, making him one of the Mu clan descendants. And his delusions only grew stronger when he saw Leo being targeted by the evil cult, and when the Mu clan patriarch walked towards him when everything was said and done, as adding those two incidents with the information he already had on Leo and Ni and Faye, Jackson no longer had any doubts about the background of Leo Skyshard. The cult wouldn't try to kill one of their own. If Leo was even remotely related to them, they wouldn't have tried to execute him live on air. And the usually reserved Mu clan patriarch talking to a boy his age is definitely a sign that he recognizes him to be a spawn of the clan. Jackson theorized, as after exiting the pit, he joined the rest of the Universal Army soldiers in restoring law and order, as he made his contribution by taking command of the investigation unit. He immediately began working on how to get to the bottom of what happened here today and find out who all were responsible. As he made an extensive list of suspects who needed to be interrogated, including some very important names like Principal Ulrich and the Geneva Academy principal, however, he conveniently left me and Faye and Leo Skyshard from the investigation list, as he thought he knew better than wasting time on squeaky clean assets. And so, through a remarkable stroke of timing, an avalanche of chaos that drew attention elsewhere, and the calculated discretion of one man in the right position, Leo not only survived the evil cult's ambush but somehow emerged from the wreckage even more spotless than he'd entered it, as the disaster that could have exposed him ended up doing the exact opposite, and solidified his image as an unfortunate victim of the cult that reinforced his cover as a memory loss warrior from the Mu clan in the most ironclad way possible. Damien Alcazar's POV, the Sky God Arena Housing Wing, Lockdown Day 1. Damien Alcazar was not at all happy to be forced into a lockdown. In fact, he was positively seething. The man had tolerated many inconveniences in his career such as diplomatic delays, hostile audits, and the occasional assassination attempt, but being treated like some common civilian under house arrest, locked inside a glorified hotel suite while his schedules burned to ash outside, was a humiliation he could not quietly accept. As enraged, he stormed toward the door for the third time that hour, boots clicking sharply against the polished tile, as the reinforced panel slid open with a smooth hiss to reveal the same soldier stationed outside. "You again," Damien snapped, eyes narrowing. "Listen closely, boy, do you have any idea who I am? I am Damien Alcazar, the patriarch of the renowned Alcazar clan. I run Brew Industries. I sit on the trade councils of 5-star systems. I don't have the time to sit on my ass while you lot stumble through your little investigation." Damien complained. However, the soldier did not even so much as blink at his outburst. This entire floor was filled with snobby guests who liked to complain thrice an hour. However, his orders to not let any of them out were absolute. "I understand, sir," the young man said, voice filtered through his helmet, as he tried his best to not sound aggressive, but under Military Directive 7A, all civilian guests have been ordered to remain within their quarters. This facility is under lockdown until further notice. If you step out without clearance, I'll be forced to detain you." "You'll what?" Damien said, his voice rising as a vein throbbed near his temple. "You'll detain me. For what, exactly? I'm not some riot starter or cult freak. I came here after buying an official ticket to watch a damn tournament, but I had no idea I'd be stuck here like a jackass. Who's compensating me for my business losses right now, huh? Your mother," Damien shouted, spittle coming out of his mouth which landed on the soldier's gear. However, he still did not so much as twitch. "I'm only following orders, sir. Please step back inside." Damien stared at him fuming, nostrils flaring, but there wasn't much more he could do in this situation other than whine, as although he might be a big fish in a small pond in his own solar system, when compared to the ocean called the universal government, he was simply a nobody. "Damned evil cult bastards," he muttered, storming back inside, as if the death toll wasn't enough, they had to drag my schedule down with them too. "If I someday manage to get my hands on one of those damn cult operatives, then I'll personally suffocate a couple of them to death." He complained, as he blamed it all on the evil cult when he had no one else to blame for his current inconvenience. Dash 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 dash. Damien Alcazar wasn't the only one who felt pissed at the evil cult operatives over the Sky God Arena attack, as newspapers and media channels across the universe spread the same narrative amongst the masses. And while the footage of the attack had been too public, too widespread for the government to tamper with the facts of what happened, they still tried to distort the reasoning behind why the evil cult did it, to make it more palatable to the masses. A couple hours after the event, footage clips specially prepared of the explosions, the murders, the golden barrier that sealed Leo underneath, and the chaos that followed, was distributed to select channels. As that was where the official spin began. As all government channels were instructed to run the same story, laced with pre-approved government propaganda, where every title was marked in bold, reading the same line that said, "A black day at the Sky God Arena, evil cult strikes the heart of our youth." The lead paragraph read, "Greater than, in what experts are now calling the deadliest civilian attack on tournament grounds in the last 5 decades, operatives believed to be affiliated with the extremist organization known as the Evil Cult of Ascension infiltrated the Sky God Arena security years prior to this event and triggered coordinated acts of terror across all major stands. Preliminary estimates indicate over 2,000 confirmed casualties and nearly 5,000 more critically injured or missing." While the motives behind the attack remain unclear, military officials believe it was an attempt to destabilize faith in the circuits, attack the next generation of warriors, and strike fear into the heart of the universal population. Below the opening summary, casualty heat maps were already being distributed, holographic models of the arena that now pulsed red in several key quadrants. One particular quadrant, the Eastern Elite stands, had suffered the worst damage, with nearly 800 confirmed deaths, many of them being popular warriors or leaders of powerful clans. But what caught the eyes of readers most weren't the death tolls or the damage estimates, but rather the choice of words printed in every article. As every single official report declared one singular message as the truth. Greater than, the evil cult intended to destroy our future. But they failed. Yet despite the universal government refusing to hide the scale of the attack, they made sure to twist the motivation into something palatable. Something heroic. Something that didn't send the general public into fear-driven chaos. They didn't say the cult had come for anyone specific. They didn't mention the kidnapping of Darnell Nuna at all. They didn't say how the cult managed to infiltrate arena security through years of forward planning and planted sleeper agents. They didn't mention how the safety barrier they deployed had withstood dozens of Monarch-level strikes. Instead, the narrative they presented was something clean and simple as a big-time terrorist attack that was caused due to a lapse in security measures. Tragic, yes. Brutal, absolutely. But ultimately, an attack on hope, and not on the system in particular. And so, by nightfall, the universe mourned. Black banners were hung across flagship channels. An official moment of silence was observed at 1800 hours Galactic Standard Time. Donations were gathered for the families of the dead. And calls for revenge and extermination of the evil cult echoed louder than ever. However, behind the scenes, the real mood was less about mourning and more about alarm. Across encrypted channels, commanders and strategists gathered. Threat assessments were drafted. Cult watchlists were revised and expanded. In several neutral solar systems, ones previously hesitant to join hands with the Universal Alliance, now pledged military cooperation in the crackdown against the evil cult, their resolve hardened by the live footage of burning seats and collapsing stands. For now, there were no suspects named publicly. No specific demands issued by the evil cult for the Darnell Nuna. No blame directed toward any particular clan or organization working in tandem with the evil cult. But there was tension. And the universe, shaken, bleeding, and unsure seemed to be eagerly waiting for the hammer of judgment to fall, as everyone now waited for the Righteous Alliance's official reaction to this dastardly attack. Dupraval Nuna's Paw, Black Serpent Guild Headquarters, Planet Twin Fang. While the average civilian was bound by military curfew, locked behind hotel room doors with no freedom to leave, Dupraval Nuna faced no such restrictions. A monarch did not ask for permission. And so, not a soul dared stop him as he left the Sky God Arena behind, vanishing from the asteroid without a word, as he returned to the central headquarters of the Black Serpents on the shadowed plains of planet Twinfang. It was here, behind the soundproof obsidian walls of his private office, that the cold mask he'd worn throughout the crisis finally cracked. He ensured not to show his real emotions before the common public, and even when alone with his so-called allies he kept his cool. However, once inside the privacy of his office, before the only man left alive who knew him as something more than the guildmaster, he finally flipped out. Crash! The Million MP desk shattered as his fist slammed down on its polished surface, shards of glass scattering over the stone tiles, as Dupravel stood trembling with rage, shoulders heaving beneath his tailored robe, teeth clenched so hard the veins on his neck bulged. They have my son, Antonio, they took my son, my blood, my heart. His voice broke. The terrifying, cold-blooded killer who ruled one of the most feared assassin guilds in the universe now stood with tears in his eyes, lip trembling, face pale with helpless fury. He's just a boy, he doesn't have the stomach for this, he's soft, too kind for this damn world, he won't survive this kind of trauma. His voice cracked again, as his fingers curled and uncurled, searching for something to break, to punish, to kill, but there was nothing left in the room for him to destroy that would help bring Darnell back. Antonio, the Black Serpent's vice guildmaster, longtime partner, and the only man who dared speak to Dupravel without fear, stood at the corner of the room with arms crossed and a tired sigh forming on his lips. Calm down, Dupravel. Your blinding love for that boy is exactly what made him a target. If you did not keep doting on him like a fool in public over the years, nobody would target a small kid like him to get to you. Antonio's words were blunt, honest and dangerous, but they were also necessary. The Righteous Alliance is already putting pressure on us, Antonio continued, eyes sharp, voice low. They're claiming they don't trust your emotional state right now. They've demanded we hand over the Timeless Assassin's skill scroll for safekeeping, before you go and trade it away for your son's life. Crash. Another crash, this time a steel ornament slammed into the wall, shattering against the stone with a sharp clang, as Dupravel turned, eyes blazing with fury. Damn right, I'll trade it. I'll give them my own heart if they ask for it, Antonio. My life. My soul. I'll crawl across broken glass if it gets him back, you hear me? Dupravel's voice shook the chamber, as Antonio said nothing at first, and only simply closed his eyes and breathed. Because Dupravel Nuna, for all his tactical genius and unrivaled bloodlust, had always been a simp for his late wife, and after she died, all that irrational, obsessive love was poured into the one thing she left behind. Darnell Nuna. Antonio had never seen his friend's heart falter in the face of enemy armies or assassination attempts, but show him a scrape on his child's knee, and he unraveled like a nervous wreck. Dupravel was a monarch, yes. A living weapon who could slaughter armies. But at his core, he was still just a man clinging desperately to the only person he had left to love. If that's really your attitude, Antonio muttered, his gaze hardening. Then I agree with the Alliance. Maybe we should hand the scroll over. Because if you can't think clearly now, then you don't have the stomach to protect it. Antonio said, as the glare that Dupravel gave him in response, could have easily killed someone faint-hearted. I'll skin you alive where you stand if you even whisper such a statement again. Dupravel threatened as he took a step forward, eyes cold now. You and I both know what that scroll means. It's not just a treasure, it's leverage, it's power. The only reason we're untouchable in the universe is because of that scroll. The only reason the universal government doesn't meddle in our business is because they're scared that we might hand it to the cult. His voice lowered, deadly calm. If we hand it over now, even under the banner of safekeeping, it'll never come back. And without it, we're just another faction. Just another guild. Our respect, our immunity, our equal standing with the great clans, it'll vanish overnight. Antonio's brow furrowed, but this time, he allowed himself a smile. Good, he said. So you haven't gone mad. Dupravel scoffed and turned away, waving him off. Of course I haven't. I'm not stupid. I would not hand over that scroll under any circumstance. But the question is, has the evil cult even demanded for the scroll? Have they spoken about any ransom? Any demand? Dupravel inquired, as, "Nothing yet," Antonio admitted, shaking his head. "No message, no conditions. Just silence." Dupravel clenched his fists tighter. "And us? Have we found anything? I've dispatched every shadow we have. Our best scouts, sleeper agents, even mobilized our affiliate groups. Finding Darnell is the guild's only priority for now," Antonio replied, as Dupravel nodded in understanding. "Good. Because if we don't find him soon, I don't think I'll be able to control my bloodlust anymore. At which point, entire planets will feel my rage," Dupravel warned, as Antonio shuddered. From time to time, Dupravel succumbed to violent episodes of unrestrained bloodlust, periods where his rage boiled so fiercely that he partook in the indiscriminate slaughter of entire civilizations, not out of necessity or strategy, but simply because his thirst for carnage refused to be quenched. This was one of the side effects of binding with the Urn of Death, the artifact that was both the source of his strength and the reason behind his insatiable bloodlust. As even Antonio feared standing across Dupravel when he was having one of those days, as when he lost control, he was known to forget the distinction between even friend and foe anymore. This was part of the reason behind why he was forced to hunt down the previous dragon Noah. As after one of his indiscriminate killing episodes, whereby he wiped out an entire planet under protection of the Du clan, he was forced to pay reparations by helping the Alliance hunt down evil cult targets, until he got his hands on the timeless assassin's skill scroll, which changed everything. By having the scroll, all his previous transgressions were pardoned, and he was given status akin to a big clan patriarch, elevating the status of the entire Black Serpents Guild in the process. However, now with his son kidnapped, all that precariously achieved progress was on the brink of unraveling, as the pressure to give up the scroll mounted from all sides. Dupravel Nunes Pav, Interrogation Chamber, Black Serpent Guild Headquarters, Planet Twin Fang. 12 hours after his office rampage, Dupravel Nunes stood deathly still in the center of a circular chamber buried deep beneath the Black Serpent Guild's core facility. It was a place sealed from light, sound, and prayer. A place built for nothing but violation. The floor of the room was etched with ritualistic glyphs soaked in old blood, the dried stains a proof of all the previous horrors that took place over the years. And at the center of it all, sprawled atop a stone pedestal, lay the freshly delivered corpse of a transcendent warrior, which the guild had specially procured by killing a guildmaster of a small-time guild. "He's a match," Antonio said as he pulled the cloth away from the body. "Same mana signature type, similar size, it's exactly what you requested." Dupravel said nothing, as he simply raised his hand and summoned the urn. Hiss. The temperature in the room suddenly dropped a few degrees, as from a fourth-dimensional space emerged an urn. It didn't float, it glided in Dupravel's palm, as the white glyphs written on its silver body glowed faintly. Antonio couldn't help but shudder in its presence, as although he had seen Dupravel perform this ritual to bring back the dead at least 100 times now, he still couldn't help but tremble every time he witnessed the act. Mahumta, Faleva, Mariba, Makumbaya. Dupravel chanted out loud in the old tongue, as he slowly unscrewed the top of the urn. Shhhhk. A dry hiss escaped the urn, like breath from a forgotten tomb as it unsealed successfully. Then, as Dupravel tilted it, a thin stream of dark black ash trickled out ever so slightly, which Dupravel cupped carefully, before closing the urn at once. Mahumta, Faleva, Mariba, Makumbaya. He chanted again, as he signaled for Antonio to pull open the dead man's mouth. Open. Antonio did as asked, and held the dead man's mouth open, as Dupravel slammed the ash into the dead man's throat before smothering the dead man's face with his palm, as he channeled his mana through the dead body. The reaction was instant. Thump. The corpse arched violently. Crack. Ribs snapped inward, the skin split across the sternum, and from within that tear, light appeared. There was a faint flicker of white light, followed by a loud scream. Arghhhhhh. A voice roared through the room, however, creepily, it did not originate from the dead man's throat, but rather from inside his lungs, from his very soul. The body spasmed, convulsing as Jishin's soul, now forcefully anchored into this foreign flesh, clawed its way back to the surface of consciousness. Gasp! The eyes flew open. And then, silence. Until Jishin looked up and saw Dupraval standing above him, calm, composed, and smiling. No, I died. What is this? Jishin croaked, his voice warped, broken, as fear appeared in his eyes. Oh, you died all right, Dupraval said coolly, crouching beside the table. But now you're back. And you're going to answer a few questions for me, Jishin. Because a summoned soul bound by my urn cannot lie. Dupraval said, as he ran his fingers evilly across Jishin's terrified face, enjoying every second of this intimidation. No. Jishin trembled. His fingers twitched, clawing at the slab, but his limbs barely responded, as fear bloomed across the new face he wore. You can't move. You can't do anything but breathe and talk unless I will you to. And currently I don't want you to move, so you can't, Dupraval said with a smile, as Jishin finally understood the position he was in. Soul magic was one of the most difficult magic in the universe, and there were not more than 3 recorded cases of there being Grandmaster or higher-tiered soul mages. Hence what Dupraval did here today, by anchoring his soul to a foreign body, was nothing short of impossible, as this was logically impossible to achieve. And yet, here he was, back alive, staring at the one man he hated the most, while being completely in his command. Where is my son? Dupraval asked, his voice soft, his smile gentle. As Jishin hesitated, even tried to resist the question with all his might, however, something within him broke instantly, as he simply couldn't help but start blabbering. I don't know. I wasn't told. I was always meant to die. I was disposable. They didn't tell me the plan beyond the attack. Dupraval's eyes narrowed, as he did not like the answer even one bit. Fucking evil cult bastards. I wasted my strength by resurrecting this clown. He knows nothing, Dupraval cursed, as in his anger he pulled Jishin's hand to his face and began biting off his fingers one by one, as he caused unimaginable pain to Jishin's body. Arg, Triple A, Jishin screamed, but there was no one in the room who gave a fuck. As Antonio simply let out a long sigh and said, although he doesn't know about Darnell, he might know something else about the evil cult that we can use. Ask him about that, he suggested, as Dupraval stopped with his harming spree for a second, and turned to look towards Jishin with cold eyes. What do you know about the cult? Tell us everything, he commanded, as with tears rolling down his eyes, Jishin began blabbering everything he knew about the cult. The elder I reported to was known only as Mighty Mouse. He was the one who orchestrated this entire operation, the mastermind who began laying the groundwork for this attack as far back as, Jishin began, his voice quivering as the truth spilled out uncontrollably. And for the next 2 hours, he spoke without pause. He told Dupraval everything. Right from the start about the brothers he trained with since childhood, the rituals they endured, the secret codes and phrases they used to identify one another across planets, the black market arms routes that armed them, the financial sources that sustained them, the sanctuaries they built in remote systems, the cult's organizational hierarchy, to the names of the other 2 transcendent operatives who had taken Darnell Nuna and disappeared through the spatial rift. He confessed it all, like an obedient little pet too terrified to bite, even as he trembled in fear with every answer he gave. And yet, when the last word left his mouth and the truth stood fully exposed before Dupraval, there was no mercy for him. There was no reprieve. There was only a slow, cruel smile that curled across the guildmaster's face, one that promised pain not out of necessity, but out of twisted indulgence. Well done, Dupraval said softly, stepping closer, his voice almost affectionate now. Now that you've served your purpose, I get to kill you again, this time slowly, this time properly, this time for fun. And so, against a backdrop of screams that tore through the stone halls like cursed music, Dupraval made good on that promise. 6 more hours of pain followed. 6 more hours of inventive cruelty, not because he needed to extract anything more, but simply because he could. As only when the ashes had been wrung of all their agony did he finally let Jishin's soul crumble into silence, granting him the one mercy he had withheld until the very end, oblivion. For more thrilling fanfiction stories like this, check out my channel Fanfic Audiobook. Dive into epic adventures, mysterious realms, and legendary journeys brought to life through immersive storytelling. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more amazing audiobooks.